The world has changed beyond recognition, but these places have barely changed at all. Long before skyscrapers, satellites, or written maps connected the continents, ancient builders were already raising monuments that would endure for thousands of years. They left behind no complete instructions, no detailed records, and often no explanation for what they created. Instead, they left silence, broken only by weathered stone, hidden passageways, and architecture that continues to challenge modern understanding. Every expedition reveals another remarkable detail, but never the whole story. It is as if these monuments were designed not only to survive the passage of time, but to preserve a mystery that each generation must rediscover for itself. Tonight, we follow those silent clues into the forgotten world they refuse to let disappear. Carved directly into a volcanic cliff in the southern Georgia, overlooking the Kuria River Valley, Vardzia remains one of the strangest engineering mysteries of the medieval world. From the outside, it appears like a gigantic honeycomb cut into solid rock, but hidden inside the mountain once existed an entire underground city containing thousands of chambers, secret tunnels, water systems, chapels, wine cellars, storage halls, and defensive passages stretching across nearly 500 meters of cliff face. The greatest mystery is not simply its size, but the fact that this enormous complex was created during the 12th century, in an age when builders supposedly lacked advanced geological knowledge, seismic engineering, or precision excavation tools. Yet nearly 900 years later, large portions of Vardzia still remain standing, despite earthquakes, erosion, invasions, freezing winters, and the collapse of entire sections of the mountain itself. Many historians describe it as a monastery. Many engineers describe it as something far more difficult to explain. Although Vardzia was known locally for centuries, much of its hidden structure only became visible after a massive earthquake in the year 1283. The quake tore away huge sections of the mountain's outer face, exposing chambers and tunnels that had previously been concealed deep inside the cliff. What shocked later explorers was the scale of the complex. Archaeological surveys revealed that Vardzia originally contained more than 3,000 rooms distributed across approximately 13 levels. Some tunnels extended over 150 meters into the mountain, while certain chambers reached depths of nearly 50 meters from the cliff surface. Modern laser scans suggest that the visible ruins today may represent only a fraction of the original structure. One of the greatest unsolved mysteries surrounding Vardzia is the excavation itself. Unlike Petra in Jordan, where many structures were carved into relatively stable sandstone facades, Vardzia was excavated into volcanic tuff, a softer rock that is easier to cut but far more vulnerable to cracking and collapse under stress. In modern geology, removing too much material from volcanic tuff can destabilize entire cliff systems. Yet the builders of Vardzia somehow created thousands of interconnected voids without triggering catastrophic structural failure. Even more mysterious is the internal layout. Modern structural engineers studying the ruins noticed that many chambers appear deliberately positioned along naturally stable rock layers. Certain corridors curve slightly instead of following straight lines, helping redistribute pressure throughout the mountain. Several stone pillars left inside the tunnels initially appear decorative. However, geological analysis suggests they function more like load-bearing support columns similar to the pillar retention systems used in modern underground mining. No surviving blueprints exist. No written engineering manuals explain how medieval builders could understand internal rock stress at such a sophisticated level. Some researchers believe the builders learned through generations of empirical observation. Others argue the precision seems too consistent to be entirely accidental. The earthquake of 1283 should have destroyed Vardzia completely. Instead, something unexpected happened. while the outer face of the cliff collapsed dramatically. Large sections of the inner complex survived. Stairways, hidden chambers, ventilation shafts, and underground halls remain structurally intact despite enormous seismic forces. This has led some modern engineers to propose that Vardzia's design unintentionally behaved like a primitive anti-seismic structure. Unlike freestanding buildings, which absorb seismic energy directly through walls and foundations, Vardzia existed inside the mountain itself. The surrounding rock mass may have dispersed part of the earthquake's energy before it reached the internal chambers. More surprisingly, laser mapping has revealed strange empty gaps between clusters of rooms. These spaces appear too deliberate to be random excavation leftovers. Some structural analysts believe they may have acted as primitive stress relief zones designed to reduce crack propagation during earthquakes. If true, Vardzia may represent one of the earliest examples of large-scale passive seismic engineering ever discovered. Another mystery involves survival. At its peak, historians estimate Vardzia may have sheltered several thousand people during invasions. Sustaining that population inside a mountain would have required enormous quantities of fresh water. Archaeologists discovered an intricate hydraulic network carved directly into the rock. Water channels transported spring water from higher elevations throughout the complex using carefully controlled gradients. This precision is difficult to explain. In modern hydraulic engineering, even slight slope miscalculations can cause water stagnation, flooding or erosion. Yet many Vardzia channels maintained stable flow over centuries. Some tunnels also contain mineral coatings resembling primitive waterproofing compounds. The exact composition of these materials remains poorly understood. Despite centuries of moisture exposure, portions of the channel still resist significant leakage. Several researchers have compared the hydraulic sophistication of Vardzia to certain Roman systems, despite Georgia being far outside the core engineering sphere of the Roman Empire. Ventilation may be one of the most underrated mysteries of Vardzia. A city hidden inside rock should have suffered from smoke accumulation, oxygen depletion, humidity buildup, and dangerous temperature fluctuations. Yet modern measurements show that many chambers maintain surprisingly stable internal temperatures throughout the year. Researchers discovered narrow shafts and concealed openings integrated into the cliff system. These passages appear positioned to create pressure differences that naturally circulate air through the complex. The principle resembles modern passive ventilation engineering. Warm air rises through upper shafts while cooler air enters from lower openings, generating continuous airflow without mechanical assistance. What makes the system remarkable is its concealment. Many ventilation openings are nearly invisible from outside the mountain, preserving the defensive secrecy of the complex. Some military historians believe this integration of survival engineering and camouflage was centuries ahead of its time. The most haunting mystery inside Vardzia may not be the tunnels or the engineering. It may be the paintings. Deep within the Church of the Dormition, ancient frescoes still cling to the stone walls after nearly 9 centuries. They survived earthquakes, smoke exposure, moisture, mineral deposits, freezing winters, and centuries of human activity inside the caves. Under normal conditions, medieval wall paintings in humid cave environments deteriorate rapidly. Pigments fade, plaster separates, organic binders decay. Yet many Vardzia frescoes remain astonishingly vivid. Among the most famous are the portraits believed to depict Queen Tamar and King George III. The pigments retain remarkable depth despite their age. Scientific pigment analysis identified mineral compounds including lapis-derived blues, iron oxides, copper-based greens, and rare imported materials not commonly available in the region during that period. This raises major questions about medieval Georgian trade networks and artistic technology. But the greater mystery lies in preservation. Modern conservators studying the frescoes found that certain pigment layers bonded unusually well to the cave walls. Some areas show adhesion strength far beyond what would normally be expected from medieval limeplaster techniques. Microclimate studies inside the church suggest that the cave's stable humidity and temperature may have unintentionally created ideal preservation conditions. However, this explanation remains incomplete because nearby cave paintings of similar age in other regions deteriorated far more severely despite comparable environments. Some researchers suspect the plaster mixture itself may have contained unique mineral additives enhancing durability. Others believe the volcanic chemistry of the surrounding rock interacted with the pigments in unexpected ways over centuries, effectively sealing parts of the artwork. No consensus exists. Even today, conservators struggle to fully explain why the colors survived so well, while entire civilizations vanished around them. The paintings appear less like fragile medieval art and more like messages trapped inside stone. Do you think Vardzia was simply an extraordinary medieval achievement, or evidence of engineering knowledge far ahead of its time? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In Pakistan's Swat Valley, Butkara Stupa survived earthquakes, invasions, and 2,000 years of erosion. Yet some archaeologists believe its most advanced technology is still unexplained. The site was first systematically excavated in the 1950s by the Italian archaeological mission led by Domenico Faccenna. Beneath layers of collapsed stone, archaeologists discovered something unexpected. The stupa had not been built once. It had been enlarged repeatedly for centuries, each new structure wrapped precisely around the older core without destroying it. That discovery transformed Butkara from a forgotten Buddhist ruin into one of the strangest engineering puzzles in ancient Gandhara. Most ancient monuments were rebuilt by demolishing earlier structures, but Butkara followed a completely different principle. Archaeologists identified multiple construction phases dating from roughly the 3rd century BCE to the 10th century CE. Instead of replacing the original Ashokan stupa, builders continuously encased it inside newer stone shells. This sounds simple until the engineering implications are understood. Every expansion changed the weight distribution of the monument. A slight asymmetry could have shifted the center of gravity, creating stress fractures that would eventually collapse the structure. Yet the stupa remained remarkably stable for over 2,000 years in one of the most seismically active regions of Asia. Modern engineers use layered shell construction and stress calculations through computer modeling. The builders of Butkara had none of those tools. Still, the monument maintained structural balance through repeated enlargements across centuries. Similar layered expansion can be seen at sites like Borobudur or some Mesoamerican pyramids, but Butkara's precision is unusual because the entire structure relied heavily on brittle schist stone rather than massive limestone block. One of the greatest puzzles at Butkara is the material itself. The monument was built largely from grey schist, a metamorphic rock notorious for splitting along natural layers. Unlike granite, schist is extremely difficult to shape into uniform architectural blocks because it fractures unpredictably under pressure. Yet at Butkara, many joints fit with astonishing precision. Some gaps between stones are only a few millimeters wide. Archaeologists found evidence that the builders cut the blocks with highly controlled angles, despite using what should have been relatively primitive Iron Age tools. This raises a major question. How did ancient Gandharan craftsmen achieve such consistency with a material considered unstable, even by modern stoneworkers? Comparisons are often made with Inca polygonal masonry in Peru, or the granite cutting techniques at Great Pyramid of Giza. However, those civilizations worked with far more predictable stone types. Schist behaves differently. Even today, quarry workers avoid using it for high-load precision structures because thermal expansion and moisture penetration can accelerate cracking. Butkara somehow overcame those limitations. The Swat Valley lies near the collision zone between the Indian and Eurasian tectonic plates. This region has experienced destructive earthquakes for thousands of years. Heavy stone stupas should not survive long in such conditions. Yet parts of Butkara remained standing after centuries of seismic activity. Excavation reports revealed something unusual beneath the structure. Certain foundation layers appear intentionally arranged to distribute stress outward rather than concentrate it vertically. Some researchers compare this to primitive seismic buffering systems. Modern earthquake engineering uses flexible foundations and force dispersal geometry. But Butkara obviously lacked steel reinforcements or rubber dampers, yet the builders may have discovered similar principles through empirical observation. The layered stone arrangement possibly reduced resonance vibrations during tremors. What makes this even stranger is timing. Sophisticated anti-seismic architecture is usually associated with Roman engineering or much later Japanese wooden construction. Butkara may preserve evidence that ancient Gandharan builders understood practical earthquake mitigation more than a millennium earlier. The sculptures around Butkara Stupa reveal another mystery. Many statues display distinctly Hellenistic proportions, realistic drapery folds, symmetrical facial geometry, and anatomical detailing rarely seen in early South Asian art. Historians usually attribute this to the aftermath of Alexander the Great's campaigns in Central Asia around 327 BCE. Greek influence entered Gandhara through Indo-Greek kingdoms and later Kushan patronage. But the precision of the artistic transfer is extraordinary. Some Buddha statues from Gandhara resemble Mediterranean marble sculpture more closely than traditional Indian religious art. The carving techniques used on schist achieved deep shadow effects and layered clothing textures comparable to Hellenistic workshops thousands of kilometers away. Without printing, global trade networks, or modern communication, how did such specialized artistic mathematics spread so accurately across Eurasia? Even more mysterious is the possibility that Gandharan sculptors were using proportional systems similar to classical Greek geometry. Several statues show recurring ratios in facial spacing and body dimensions, remarkably close to idealized Hellenistic canon measurements. Surrounding the main monument are more than 200 subsidiary stupas and shrines. At first glance, they seem randomly distributed, but aerial surveys revealed repeating spatial patterns around the central core. Many structures maintain surprisingly consistent distances despite being built across different centuries. This suggests long-term planning rather than chaotic religious expansion. Some archaeologists believe the layout may have reflected ritual movement paths or symbolic cosmology. Others suspect astronomical alignment played a role, though evidence remains inconclusive. The statistical consistency itself is difficult to explain. Ancient builders without aerial perspectives somehow preserved large-scale spatial coherence across generations. Similar mysteries exist at Teotihuacan and Angkor Wat, where citywide geometry appears too organized for purely organic development. Butkara may represent a smaller yet equally sophisticated example of ancient spatial engineering. Today, Butkara appears grey and weathered, but chemical analysis of surviving fragments suggests the complex was once vividly painted. Microscopic traces of red ochre, azurite blue, and mineral-based pigments were found on several sculptures. The problem is survival. The Swat Valley experiences intense seasonal rain, strong UV exposure, and major temperature fluctuations. Organic paints should have disappeared centuries ago, yet pigment residues endured. Researchers suspect ancient artisans mixed mineral powders with organic binding agents that created unusually durable coatings. Similar mysteries exist with Maya blue in Mesoamerica, a pigment capable of surviving tropical climates for over 1,000 years. At Butkara, the exact composition remains uncertain. If reconstructed, it could reveal sophisticated chemical knowledge hidden inside, what is usually described as purely religious art. The greatest mystery at Butkara may be invisible. Deep inside the stupa, archaeologists discovered relic chambers positioned extraordinarily close to the geometric center of successive construction phases. This is astonishing because the monument was enlarged repeatedly over centuries. Maintaining central alignment during a single construction project is difficult enough. Preserving it across generations without modern surveying equipment borders on impossible. Even a small angular deviation during one expansion phase would shift the central axis dramatically over time. Yet measurements show remarkable continuity between multiple layers of the monument. This suggests the builders used a standardized system of geometry and reference points, far more advanced than previously assumed for ancient Gandhara. Some researchers speculate they employed plumb-line triangulation, calibrated measuring rods, or astronomical orientation methods. Others believe master builders passed down exact proportional formulas through guild traditions over centuries. The mathematical challenge becomes clearer when compared with medieval European cathedrals. Many Gothic builders struggled to maintain axial symmetry, even with written plans and metal tools. Butkara achieved astonishing consistency in a far earlier era, using fragile materials and likely oral engineering traditions. The deeper archaeologists study the monument, the less accidental its geometry appears. Do you think the builders of Butkara Stupa possessed engineering knowledge far ahead of their time? Or are we still missing a huge piece of ancient history? Let us know your theory in the comments below. Far above the western shore of the Caspian Sea in modern-day Azerbaijan, Beshbarmag Mountain rises like a giant stone fang from the earth. For thousands of years, travelers crossing the Silk Road stopped beneath this isolated mountain, believing it was a sacred gateway between the human world and the heavens. Yet beyond its legends lies something far more unsettling. Evidence of engineering, astronomy, and construction techniques that still raise difficult questions today. The first serious archaeological surveys around Beshbarmag began during the Soviet period in the 20th century. Early expeditions uncovered fragments of ceramic vessels, fire pits, ritual platforms, and traces of ancient stairways carved directly into the mountain. Later studies revealed that the site was not used during only one era. Layers of occupation suggested repeated activity from ancient Caucasian tribes, Persian influences, medieval pilgrims, and Silk Road travelers over many centuries. Each excavation added another piece to the mystery, but also exposed technological problems researchers still struggle to explain. One of the first puzzles involves the mountain itself. Beshbarmag stands approximately 382 meters above the surrounding plain, composed largely of sandstone and sedimentary rock vulnerable to erosion. Geological studies show the area experiences strong Caspian winds carrying salt particles capable of accelerating weathering. Under such conditions, exposed structures should deteriorate relatively quickly. Yet some carved steps, retaining walls, and ritual platforms have survived for centuries in surprisingly stable condition. Researchers examining the surviving masonry noticed unusual surface hardening on several stone sections. Similar effects have been documented at Petra in Jordan and parts of Machu Picchu in Peru, where mineral crystallization may have naturally reinforced exposed rock over time. However, some specialists suspect ancient builders at Beshbarmag intentionally selected rock layers with higher silica density or used mineral-based coatings now mostly lost to erosion. What makes this controversial is that no surviving written records describe such methods in the Caucasus during that period. Excavations also revealed narrow carved channels running across parts of the mountain slope. At first, they were dismissed as natural fractures. Later measurements showed several maintained nearly identical gradients over long distances, suggesting deliberate hydraulic engineering. The channels appear designed to guide small but continuous flows of water without causing overflow or erosion. Modern engineers note that maintaining stable gravity-fed water movement on steep stone surfaces requires surprisingly precise calculations. This becomes even stranger when considering the mountain's environment. The surrounding region receives relatively low annual rainfall compared to wetter mountain systems farther west in the Caucasus. Ancient builders somehow created a controlled water distribution network in an area where water itself was limited. Similar hydraulic sophistication appears at ancient Nabatean sites in Jordan, where engineers harvested seasonal rainfall with remarkable efficiency. Yet the civilization associated with Besh Barmag remains poorly understood and left behind no surviving technical documentation. Archaeologists later uncovered traces of pilgrimage shelters and ritual fire areas near the upper sections of the mountain. Carbon samples from some burned materials suggested repeated ritual activity across multiple centuries rather than one continuous settlement. This raised a major question. Why did so many cultures continue returning to the same isolated peak generation after generation? Part of the answer may lie in the mountain's strange geographic position. Besh Barmag stands near historic trade corridors connecting Persia, Central Asia, the Caucasus, and the Caspian coast. From the upper slopes, visibility extends across vast sections of surrounding terrain. Some historians believe the site may have doubled as an observational signaling point for travelers moving along Silk Road routes. If true, the mountain was not only sacred but strategically important. But the greatest mystery surrounding Besh Barmag involves astronomy. Several Azerbaijani researchers studying the mountain noticed that sunlight behaves unusually around certain carved sections during seasonal transitions. Near the equinoxes and summer solstice, sunlight passes through natural rock gaps and illuminates specific ritual zones for only short periods. Measurements taken during field observations suggest some alignments are remarkably precise. Ancient cultures around the world often track solar movement, but the engineering implications here are difficult to ignore. To intentionally align ceremonial areas with seasonal solar angles, builders would need years, possibly generations, of astronomical observation. They would have to record how sunrise and sunset positions shifted across the horizon throughout the year, and then incorporate those measurements into the site's layout. This is where comparisons become unavoidable. At Chichen Itza, the famous shadow serpent effect appears during equinox sunsets because of carefully calculated architectural geometry. At Newgrange, winter solstice sunlight enters a narrow passage and illuminates the burial chamber for only minutes each year. Stonehenge aligns with solstice sunrise positions with extraordinary accuracy despite its age. Besh Barmag may represent a smaller and less famous example of the same phenomenon emerging independently in the Caucasus. Some researchers argue the alignments could simply be coincidence created by natural geology. Others disagree, pointing out that several pathways and ritual areas appear positioned specifically towards solar directions rather than random orientations. If intentional, the site suggests a surprisingly advanced understanding of cyclical astronomy among ancient peoples of the region. Adding to the mystery are the mountain's acoustic properties. Several caves near the shrine areas produce unusual sound reflections. Field tests demonstrated that voices spoken in certain chambers can travel farther than expected through connected rock corridors. Similar acoustic engineering has been documented in ancient ceremonial sites such as the Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni, where specific frequencies resonate powerfully within underground chambers. Researchers at Besh Barmag still debate whether the sound effects were intentionally exploited for rituals or simply discovered accidentally by pilgrims over centuries. The mountain's role in local mythology further complicates interpretation. For generations, people believed Beshbarmag possessed spiritual energy capable of connecting humans with supernatural forces. Medieval travelers described it as a sacred mountain where prayers carried unusual power. Some stories claimed wandering mystics could predict events after meditating near the summit. While such legends cannot be scientifically verified, they may explain why the site remained active long after many nearby settlements disappeared. Modern satellite imaging and drone surveys have recently revealed additional terraces and carved pathways previously hidden by erosion and vegetation. Every new survey seems to expand the scale of the site rather than simplify it. Archaeologists increasingly suspect that much of the original complex may already have collapsed or remains buried beneath centuries of rockfall. What remains unanswered is how ancient builders working with limited tools managed to create stable structures, controlled water channels, astronomical alignments, and ritual pathways on such hostile terrain. Even today, constructing permanent infrastructure on steep eroding sandstone requires careful geological reinforcement and modern surveying equipment. Do you think the ancient builders of Beshbarmag Mountain truly understood advanced engineering and astronomy far beyond what historians expect? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Inside the massive stone defences of Purana Khila in Delhi, India, stands a mosque that many historians consider one of the most technically important transition points in Indo-Islamic architecture, the Qila-i-Kuna Mosque, built around 1541 CE during the reign of Sher Shah Suri. At first glance, it appears smaller and less famous than later Mughal monuments like the Taj Mahal or Jama Masjid. But archaeologists and architectural historians have spent decades studying it because the structure contains engineering choices that seem far ahead of their time. The mosque was first systematically documented during British surveys of Delhi in the 19th century, but modern archaeological attention intensified after the Archaeological Survey of India began detailed conservation and structural studies in the 20th century. Excavations around Purana Khila revealed older occupation layers beneath the fortress, including remains linked to earlier Sultanate periods and possibly even much older settlements. Each survey added another question. Why was such an experimentally advanced mosque built during a short and politically unstable reign lasting barely 5 years? Early researchers focused mostly on inscriptions and decoration. Later, architectural historians began noticing something more unusual. The mosque did not follow a single stylistic tradition. Instead, it fused Afghan military simplicity, Persian geometric precision, and emerging Mughal spatial planning into one structure. That combination is what transformed the building from a historical monument into an archaeological mystery. The greatest mystery surrounding Qila-i-Kuna Mosque is its extraordinarily refined material coordination. The structure combines red sandstone, white marble, grey quartzite, lime mortar, glazed tile traces, and finely carved stone panels with an accuracy that still surprises conservation engineers today. Most 16th century buildings in northern India relied heavily on thick stone masses to compensate for weak bonding systems. Qila-i-Kuna appears different. The builders carefully selected stones with different densities and thermal behaviours, then combined them in layered compositions that minimized visible cracking despite Delhi's extreme climate swings. Summer temperatures in Delhi can exceed 45 degrees Celsius, while winter nights may drop below 5 degrees. Such expansion and contraction normally weaken stone joints over centuries, yet large portions of the mosque remained structurally stable after nearly 500 years. Researchers studying Mughal and Sur period architecture observed that the builders used a hybrid masonry system. A rubble masonry core locked together with lime mortar, then covered with precision-cut facing stones. The outer skin was not merely decorative, it distributed pressure outward, while protecting the weaker internal core from moisture penetration. The red sandstone sections absorb heat differently from the marble inlays. Modern engineers know that combining materials with different thermal expansion rates can produce stress fractures, but the mosque's builders appear to have compensated through joint spacing, mortar elasticity and load distribution techniques centuries before thermal engineering became a scientific discipline. Even more mysterious is the precision of the stone fitting. In several surviving sections, the joints are so thin that inserting a metal blade between blocks becomes difficult. Similar tight-fitting masonry is often associated with far older civilizations such as the Inca, Sacsayhuaman, or certain Roman imperial structures. But unlike those monuments, Kila y Cuna combines precision fitting with elaborate surface ornamentation simultaneously. Conservation teams also discovered traces of polished lime plaster beneath damaged surfaces. Historical Islamic lime plasters sometimes contained organic additives such as jaggery, lentils, plant extracts, or egg compounds to improve bonding and flexibility. Some Indian historical mortars have demonstrated surprising resistance to humidity and microbial damage compared with modern cement repairs, which often fail faster because they trap moisture inside ancient walls. This raises an uncomfortable question for preservation experts. Did 16th century builders understand material behavior better than many modern restoration attempts? 20th century restoration work uncovered evidence that the mosque was constructed in carefully sequenced phases, rather than a single uninterrupted project. Structural differences between arch sections suggest multiple construction teams or evolving architectural plans during the build. Some scholars even argue that the project may have begun under the Mughal Emperor Humayun before Sher Shah Suri seized Delhi in 1540. If true, the mosque becomes more than a religious structure. It becomes physical evidence of technological continuity between rival empires at war. Detailed measurements taken during conservation studies revealed highly sophisticated geometric planning. The central E1 arch dominates the facade through proportional scaling rather than sheer size alone. The builders manipulated visual perspective so the entrance appears taller and more imposing than its actual dimensions. Archaeologists also identified traces of coloured tile and pigment that once covered portions of the facade. Today the mosque appears relatively restrained, but in the 16th century it may have displayed vivid contrasts of deep red, white, blue, and gold tones reflecting sunlight across the courtyard. The mosque's 5-arch facade hides a surprisingly advanced load-bearing system. The central prayer chamber uses a dome transition technique that blends squinches, arches, and recessed geometry to redirect weight toward thick support walls. At the time, large masonry domes were among the greatest engineering challenges in the Islamic world. A dome constantly pushes outward under its own mass. Without proper load transfer, walls crack and eventually collapse. Kila y Cuna solved this problem using layered transitional geometry. The internal structure gradually converts a square chamber into a circular dome base through angled corner supports and interconnected arches. Similar engineering principles appeared in Persian architecture centuries earlier, but the Delhi mosque adapted them to local stone materials and climate conditions. Modern structural analysis suggests that the thick walls and arch sequencing distribute force with remarkable efficiency. Even after centuries of earthquakes, invasions, humidity and pollution, the mosque remains standing with much of its core geometry intact. One of the least discussed mysteries involves environmental engineering. Delhi's climate is harsh: intense sunlight, dust storms, monsoon humidity, and seasonal heat extremes. Yet the mosque interior remains noticeably cooler than surrounding exposed stone areas. Architectural historians believe the builders intentionally designed airflow channels through recessed openings, high arches, and wall cavities. The thick stone walls act as thermal buffers, absorbing heat slowly during the day and releasing it gradually at night. The prayer hall's proportions also maximize shade distribution. Light enters indirectly through carefully positioned openings rather than direct exposure. Similar passive cooling systems are now praised in sustainable architecture, yet medieval builders implemented them without electricity simulation software or modern thermodynamics. The decorative program of Gila y Cuna Mosque appears artistic on the surface, but underneath lies extreme geometric discipline. Hexagonal stars, repeating polygons, calligraphic bands, and symmetrical framing patterns follow strict proportional logic. Researchers comparing Islamic monuments across Persia, Central Asia, and India found that many patterns align with advanced geometric subdivision methods similar to mathematical tiling systems. The builders were effectively turning architecture into applied geometry. Some historians believe these designs served spiritual symbolism. Others argue they also had practical value by visually masking structural joints and distributing stress across carved surfaces. Even today, recreating certain symmetrical stone patterns by hand would require highly skilled craftsmen using calibrated measurement systems. Yet 16th century artisans achieved this repeatedly across the monument with minimal margin of error. What do you think was the greatest secret behind the survival of Gila y Cuna Mosque? The advanced material engineering, the hidden structural design, or knowledge that has been lost over time? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Harire ancient city rises from the coral surface of Kish Island in southern Iran, surrounded by salt air, extreme heat, and almost no permanent fresh water. Yet nearly 1,000 years ago, a thriving city stood here for centuries. What archaeologists discovered beneath its ruins suggests Harire may have possessed environmental engineering technology, far more advanced than historians once believed. The ruins of Harire were formally identified during archaeological surveys on Kish Island in the 20th century, with major excavations intensifying in the 1970s and 1980s. Researchers uncovered residential districts, underground water systems, workshops, ports, and massive coral stone structures spread across nearly 120 hectares. The deeper archaeologists dug, the stranger the city became. Harire should never have survived as a major urban centre. Kish Island receives extremely low annual rainfall, often less than 150 millimeters per year. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 40 degrees Celsius, while humidity from the Persian Gulf accelerates salt corrosion on stone and metal. Even modern infrastructure struggles in such conditions. Yet between the 8th and 14th centuries, Harire became an important trade hub connecting Persia, India, East Africa, and the Arabian Peninsula. Historical records describe flourishing markets, wealthy merchants, and advanced craftsmanship. The question is simple: how did a medieval city sustain thousands of people on an island with almost no natural freshwater? The answer may lie underground. Archaeologists discovered carved channels, underground reservoirs, and complex drainage systems cut directly into fossilized coral bedrock. Some sections appear designed not only to transport water, but also to cool it before distribution. Researchers compared parts of the network to the Persian Qanat systems used on the mainland, yet Harire's version appears adapted specifically for humid island conditions. Several engineers studying the ruins proposed a controversial possibility. Harire's inhabitants may have partially relied on atmospheric moisture collection. The Persian Gulf maintains high humidity levels year-round, often above 60 to 70% at night. If cool underground chambers forced condensation from humid air, the city may have produced fresh water through passive climate engineering centuries before modern atmospheric water generators. No surviving written record fully explains the system. Much of the underground structure remains buried. One of the most shocking aspects of Harire is not what collapsed, but what did not. The city's walls were constructed largely from coral stone and lime-based mortar, materials normally vulnerable to salt crystallization. In coastal environments, salt enters porous stone, expands during evaporation, and slowly destroys structures from within. Across the Persian Gulf, many later coastal buildings deteriorated within a few centuries because of this process. Yet sections of Hariri survived nearly 1,000 years under constant exposure to salty air and sandstorms. Material analysis revealed unusual mineral compositions inside the mortar. Researchers found mixtures of lime, ash, crushed shell material, and marine minerals that appear capable of reducing internal salt expansion. Some samples even displayed partial self-sealing behavior when exposed to moisture. This has led to comparisons with Roman marine concrete, which famously becomes stronger through long-term contact with seawater due to rare mineral reactions involving volcanic ash. But Hariri existed far from the Mediterranean world. If the builders independently developed similar anti-corrosion chemistry, it suggests ancient engineers across different civilizations may have discovered advanced material science through trial and observation long before modern chemistry existed. The precision is especially surprising considering the environment. Kish Island experiences extreme thermal expansion between day and night temperatures. Any construction error would gradually fracture walls over decades. Yet many Hariri foundations remained structurally stable for centuries. Inside several major structures, archaeologists identified narrow corridors, ventilation shafts, elevated openings, and hollow subfloor chambers. At first, these seemed like ordinary architectural features. Later airflow simulations changed that assumption completely. Modern computational models showed the buildings could generate passive convection currents. Hot air naturally rose through upper vents, while cooler air circulated through shaded lower chambers. Some reconstructed thermal models suggest interior temperatures may have remained 8 to 12 degrees Celsius, cooler than outside conditions. That difference is enormous in Gulf climates. What makes the system remarkable is its efficiency without mechanical energy. The principles resemble modern passive cooling architecture now promoted in sustainable engineering projects across the Middle East. Similar concepts exist in Persian wind catchers called bad gears, but Hariri's implementation appears unusually integrated into entire building complexes rather than isolated towers. Some archaeologists believe the city's architects possessed a highly refined understanding of airflow, pressure differentials, humidity control, and thermal mass. They may not have known the physics mathematically, but centuries of experimentation could have produced engineering knowledge almost impossible to detect from historical texts alone. The result was essentially a natural air conditioning system operating nearly 1,000 years before electricity. The most controversial discoveries at Hariri came from its industrial workshops. Excavations uncovered evidence of glass production, ceramic processing, and high-temperature furnaces capable of extremely stable heating conditions. Fragments of finished glassware found at the site display exceptional transparency and color consistency despite centuries buried in salty soil. Producing such glass was extraordinarily difficult in the medieval world. Even tiny fluctuations in furnace temperature can introduce bubbles, cloudiness, fractures, or color distortion. To manufacture high-quality transparent glass, temperatures often must remain between roughly 1,100 and 1,300 degrees Celsius for extended periods with controlled oxygen flow. Achieving that consistency without modern thermometers or industrial fuel systems should have been incredibly challenging. Yet some Hariri glass samples rival luxury Islamic glassware produced in major centers like Cairo or Damascus. Researchers studying furnace remains discovered sophisticated airflow channels built beneath firing chambers. These may have allowed craftsmen to regulate combustion intensity with surprising precision. Certain kiln layouts also appear designed to recycle heat internally, improving fuel efficiency while stabilizing temperatures. This is where the mystery deepens. Kish Island possessed limited natural fuel resources. Large-scale glass production requires enormous energy consumption. Historians still debate how Harira maintained industrial furnaces at such temperatures on a relatively resource-poor island. Some theories suggest imported charcoal networks from mainland Persia. Others argue the workshops operated using highly optimized furnace engineering far beyond what historians previously attributed to the region. Chemical analysis of several glass fragments revealed unusually low impurity levels, suggesting extremely refined raw material preparation. Some pieces also contained mineral additives likely used to stabilize color during heating. To modern materials scientists, the workshops imply a forgotten level of industrial specialization. Harira may not simply have been a trading city, it may have been a technological manufacturing center, operating at a level historians underestimated for centuries. Several structural axes inside Harira align closely with solar positions during seasonal transitions. While this could be coincidence, maritime historians believe the orientation may have served practical purposes tied to navigation and seasonal trade winds. The Persian Gulf was one of the ancient world's busiest maritime corridors. Merchants sailing between Persia, India, and East Africa depended heavily on monsoon cycles, celestial navigation, and predictable currents. Even small miscalculations could strand ships in dangerous waters for months. Some scholars propose Harira functioned partly as a navigational coordination center. Elevated observation points near the coast may have allowed tracking of stars, sunrise positions, and seasonal atmospheric patterns. Similar astronomical maritime relationships existed in places like ancient Oman, Indian Ocean ports, and Polynesian navigation cultures. If true, Harira combined engineering, astronomy, and commerce into a unified urban system, designed specifically for survival and control in one of the harshest trade environments on Earth. What do you think really caused the sudden collapse of Harira? Environmental disaster, hidden engineering failure, or something historians still haven't discovered? Share your theory in the comments below. Cacaxtla sits on a quiet hill in central Mexico, yet hidden inside its ancient walls are colors that should not still exist. More than 1,000 years after the city was abandoned, vivid blues, reds, blacks, and yellows still cling to its murals with impossible intensity. The greatest mystery is not the city itself, but the technology behind a pigment known as Maya blue, a material so chemically stable that even modern scientists struggle to fully understand how ancient civilizations created it without modern laboratories, controlled furnaces, or industrial chemistry. Cacaxtla remained buried for centuries beneath earth and vegetation in the modern Mexican state of Tlaxcala. In 1975, local farmers accidentally uncovered fragments of painted walls while working the land near the archaeological zone. Excavations led by Mexican archaeologists soon revealed one of the most extraordinary mural complexes ever discovered in Mesoamerica. Unlike many ancient paintings that survive only as faded traces, the murals of Cacaxtla appeared shockingly vibrant. Researchers immediately realized this site was different. The preservation quality rivaled some Egyptian tomb paintings despite existing in a far wetter and harsher environment. Further excavations uncovered ceremonial platforms, elevated plazas, drainage systems, and elite compounds connected to the Olmeca Xicallanca culture, a group believed to have risen after the collapse of Teotihuacan around the 7th century. Yet the artistic complexity discovered at Cacaxtla seemed far beyond what historians expected from a relatively small regional city. The most famous structure at Cacaxtla is the Battle Mural, a massive painted scene stretching more than 20 meters across temple walls. It depicts warriors wearing jaguar costumes, bird helmets, and marine imagery in astonishing detail. Nearby murals inside the Temple of Venus show celestial symbolism connected to astronomy and ritual power. What shocked researchers most was the survival of the colors themselves. Normally, pigments in tropical or semi-humid climates decay rapidly because moisture breaks down organic compounds. Across many Mesoamerican sites, murals have faded into faint shadows after only a few centuries of exposure. Yet at Cacaxtla, the pigments remained extraordinarily stable after more than 1,000 years. Scientific analysis revealed the use of iron oxides, carbon blacks, calcium compounds, and rare clay minerals. Some pigments penetrated deeply into multiple lime plaster layers, almost chemically bonding with the wall itself. This process resembles aspects of modern fresco techniques used during the European Renaissance centuries later. Researchers compared the durability of Cacaxtla's murals to Roman frescoes preserved at Pompeii. But there is a critical difference. Pompeii's paintings survived largely because volcanic ash sealed them in a dry environment after the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 CE. Cacaxtla survived exposed to seasonal humidity, rain, temperature fluctuations, and biological decay. That difference makes its preservation even more difficult to explain. The greatest technological mystery at Cacaxtla centers around the famous pigment known today as Maya blue. Some blue sections of the murals contain chemical characteristics linked to this legendary material, one of the most durable pigments ever produced in the ancient world. Modern scientists spent decades trying to understand why Maya blue behaves unlike ordinary paint. Under laboratory testing, the pigment resists acid damage, humidity, chemical corrosion, and biological decomposition. Even nitric acid struggles to destroy it completely. Many modern synthetic pigments degrade faster. The secret lies in an extraordinary molecular structure created by combining indigo dye with a rare clay mineral called palygorskites. On paper, the ingredients sound simple. In reality, producing the pigment requires precise heat control. Studies suggest temperatures between approximately 150 and 200 degrees Celsius were necessary for the chemical bond to stabilize correctly. That creates a massive historical problem. Ancient Mesoamerican civilizations had no thermometers, industrial kilns, or modern chemistry equipment. If the temperature was too low, the molecular channels inside the clay would not absorb the indigo properly. If the temperature became too high, the organic dye would burn away completely. The process required an incredibly narrow thermal balance. Even more mysterious is the consistency. The pigment found across different Mesoamerican regions maintained remarkably similar chemical stability over centuries. That suggests ancient artisans possessed a standardized technical process sophisticated enough to reproduce the material repeatedly with minimal error. Some chemists compared Maya blue to nanocomposite materials because the organic dye molecules become trapped inside microscopic channels within the clay structure. In simple terms, the color becomes physically locked into the mineral itself. This is partly why the pigment survives moisture and oxidation so effectively. For decades, laboratories struggled to recreate authentic Maya blue with the same long-term durability. Some reproductions initially looked identical, but later degraded faster than archaeological samples. This led researchers to suspect that ancient artisans may have used additional steps or organic adhesives still not fully identified. At Cacaxtla, the presence of such advanced pigment technology raises uncomfortable questions for conventional assumptions about ancient engineering. How did artisans discover this process without modern chemistry? Was it accidental experimentation repeated over generations? Or did specialized knowledge networks exist across Mesoamerica, transmitting material science techniques with astonishing precision? The mystery becomes even deeper when considering scale. Cacaxtla was not a gigantic empire like Rome or Han China, Yet its artisans achieved material stability rivaling some modern engineered pigments. The mysteries of Cacaxtla extend far beyond paint. The city itself demonstrates surprising engineering sophistication for a regional centre. The site sits on elevated terrain exposed to seasonal rainstorms. Normally, plaster structures in such conditions erode rapidly, yet many of Cacaxtla's foundations and wall layers remained stable for centuries. Archaeologists discovered carefully designed drainage channels directing rainwater away from ceremonial structures. Elevated platforms reduced soil saturation during storms, while lime-based plaster coatings helped seal surfaces from moisture infiltration. Microscopic analysis of the plaster revealed multiple finely polished layers. Some surfaces appear burnished to reduce porosity, similar to waterproof finishing techniques used in later civilizations. Achieving such smoothness required precise timing during plaster curing. If polished too early, the material would deform. Too late, and it would crack. The engineering becomes even more impressive considering the absence of metal construction tools comparable to those of the classical Mediterranean world. Another unresolved mystery is the strange mixture of artistic traditions found at Cacaxtla. The murals contain clear Maya influences from southern tropical regions hundreds of kilometers away, including bird-serpent imagery, jaguar symbolism, and complex celestial iconography. Yet Cacaxtla lies deep within central Mexico. Historians once believed cultures in these regions remained relatively isolated after the fall of Teotihuacan, but the murals suggest extensive long-distance interaction. Marine imagery appears despite the city being far inland. Exotic feathers, obsidian trade routes, and tropical symbolism imply networks of exchange spanning enormous distances. Some researchers believe Cacaxtla may have become a knowledge hub during the political vacuum left by Teotihuacan's collapse. Instead of military dominance, the city may have gained power through control of trade, ritual knowledge, and elite artistic production. Several murals and architectural alignments at Cacaxtla appear connected to the planet Venus, one of the most sacred celestial bodies in Mesoamerican religion. Venus was associated with warfare, rulership, sacrifice, and cosmic cycles. Tracking Venus accurately is extremely difficult because its visibility patterns shift through complex cycles lasting approximately 584 days. Ancient astronomers needed decades of systematic observation to predict its appearances with precision. Some mural compositions may encode celestial timing systems linked to Venus cycles. If true, this would place Cacaxtla among the advanced astronomical centers of ancient Mesoamerica despite its relatively modest physical size. Do you think the secrets of Cacaxtla were truly lost forever? Or could traces of that ancient knowledge still be waiting to be discovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Pasargadae was discovered in the Murghab Plain of southern Iran, nearly 130 kilometers northeast of modern Shiraz. Archaeologists identified the site as the first capital of the Achaemenid Empire after European expeditions in the 19th century compared the ruins with ancient Greek records describing the city built by Cyrus the Great around 550 BCE. What they found was not just an ancient capital, but a place filled with engineering mysteries that still challenge historians and structural experts today. The first shock came from the city's layout. Unlike most fortified capitals of the ancient world, Pasargadae was built with a strangely open design spread across nearly 160 hectares. Massive stone palaces, gardens, water channels, and ceremonial spaces were arranged with geometric precision across the plain. Modern satellite analysis revealed that several structures align closely with solar movement and cardinal directions, suggesting the builders used advanced surveying methods thousands of years before modern instruments existed. One of the greatest mysteries surrounds the royal gardens of Pasargadae, believed to be the earliest known example of the Persian paradise garden. Archaeologists uncovered a network of limestone water channels cut with astonishing accuracy. Some channels maintain gradients so slight that the difference is only a few millimeters per meter, yet they were capable of distributing water evenly across the entire complex. For comparison, Roman hydraulic gardens with similar precision would not appear until centuries later. Engineers studying the site found that the Persians had already mastered controlled water flow, pressure regulation, and irrigation planning during the 6th century BCE. In an arid environment where summer temperatures can exceed 40 degrees Celsius, this system transformed dry land into a functioning artificial oasis. The channels themselves present another mystery. Many were carved directly into hard limestone with surfaces unusually smooth for the Iron Age. Traditional bronze and iron tools normally leave rough extraction marks, but parts of Pasargadae's channels appear almost machine-polished. Experimental archaeologists attempting to replicate these cuts using period tools required enormous labour and still failed to achieve the same consistency. Even more puzzling is the stonework throughout the city. Several palace foundations contain limestone blocks weighing multiple tons fitted together so tightly that modern researchers struggle to insert a blade between them. Some cuts display nearly perfect right angles and flat surfaces over long distances. Historians often compare this precision to the masonry seen at Machu Picchu or certain structures in ancient Egypt, despite those civilizations being separated by oceans and thousands of years. The similarities raise difficult questions about how multiple ancient societies achieved highly advanced stone engineering with supposedly primitive tools. At the center of Pasargadae stands the most famous structure of all, Tomb of Cyrus. Built more than 2,500 years ago, the tomb has survived earthquakes, invasions, weather erosion, and even deliberate destruction attempts. Yet much of the structure remains intact. Modern structural engineers studying the tomb discovered something remarkable. The monument's step foundation appears designed to disperse seismic energy rather than resist it rigidly. The layered platform allows slight movement during ground vibrations, reducing the risk of collapse. Some experts compare this concept to modern seismic base isolation systems used in earthquake-resistant skyscrapers. The stone blocks were also connected using swallowtail-shaped metal clamps. Although most metal components disappeared long ago due to corrosion or looting, their cut sockets remain visible. This technique allowed the blocks to shift slightly during seismic activity without separating completely. Similar anti-seismic engineering would later appear in some Greek and Roman structures, but Pasargadae predates many of them. Another unresolved mystery involves transportation. Some stones used at Pasargadae originated kilometers away from the construction site. Moving multi-ton limestone blocks across uneven terrain without modern cranes, steel tools, or wheeled heavy machinery would have required extraordinary coordination. Researchers proposed theories involving sledges, rollers, mud lubrication, and large labor forces, yet no definitive evidence explains how the Persians achieved such accuracy after transport. Even small alignment errors could have ruined the geometric precision visible throughout the city. Despite this, many blocks were positioned with astonishing exactness. The city's columns present another technical anomaly. Pasargadae combines architectural influences from Mesopotamia, Anatolia, Egypt, and early Greek styles in ways historians did not expect from the period. Some column bases resemble Ionian Greek forms, while certain relief techniques echo Assyrian craftsmanship. This mixture suggests that Cyrus may have assembled artisans and engineers from across conquered territories into a single imperial construction project. If true, Pasargadae may represent one of the earliest examples of large-scale international engineering collaboration in human history. Yet perhaps the strangest mystery is how advanced the city appears compared to surrounding civilizations of its time. Around the mid-6th century BCE, much of the world still relied on relatively simple urban planning, limited hydraulic systems, and localized architectural traditions. Pasargadae instead demonstrates coordinated geometry, engineered irrigation, earthquake-resistant foundations, and multinational design principles on a massive scale. Archaeologists also discovered evidence suggesting the gardens were not merely decorative. Botanical analysis indicates the Persians imported plant species from different climate zones across the empire. Maintaining such vegetation in Iran's harsh environment would have required continuous water management and sophisticated agricultural planning. Some researchers believe the city functioned as a political symbol designed to demonstrate imperial control over both nature and engineering. In this interpretation, Pasargadae was less a capital city and more a technological statement, proof that the Achaemenid Empire could reshape landscapes themselves. Satellite imaging and digital reconstruction have further deepened the mystery. Modern scans reveal symmetrical planning patterns difficult to fully recognize from ground level. Certain palace alignments appear intentionally positioned to create visual axes across the plain, guiding movement and attention with mathematical precision. What remains unclear is how Persian surveyors achieved these alignments with the technology available at the time. There is no evidence of advanced optical instruments, yet some measurements rival the accuracy of later classical civilizations. Even today, Pasargadae continues to confuse experts because it seems to appear suddenly in history already highly sophisticated. Unlike many ancient cities that evolved gradually over centuries, Pasargadae emerged within the reign of Cyrus as a remarkably organized and technically ambitious project. That sudden leap has led some historians to argue that the Achaemenids inherited forgotten engineering knowledge from earlier cultures of Mesopotamia and Elam. Others believe the empire's enormous scale allowed it to gather the greatest craftsmen of the ancient world into one place, accelerating technological development far beyond neighboring societies. Do you think the engineers of Pasargadae truly possessed knowledge far beyond their time? Or are we still missing a crucial piece of history? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Buried within the humid floodplains of San Luis Potosí, Mexico, Tamtoc remained lost beneath vegetation and layers of sediment for centuries. At first glance, it appeared to be just another ceremonial center of the ancient Huastec civilization. But once archaeologists began mapping the site, an unsettling pattern emerged. The city's plazas, mounds, and monuments appeared aligned with astronomical events, with a precision that should have been impossible for a society without metal instruments, optical devices, or written scientific records. Even more mysterious, Tamtoc was built in one of the wettest and most unstable environments in Mesoamerica. Yet many of its earth structures survived for more than 2,000 years. Today, researchers still debate whether the technological sophistication of Tamtoc has been drastically underestimated. Although local communities had known about strange mounds in the region for generations, large-scale archaeological investigation only began in the 20th century. Located within the Huasteca region near the Tampan River system, Tamtoc covers more than 130 hectares, making it one of the largest Huastec ceremonial centers ever discovered. Excavations intensified during the 1960s and later under Mexican archaeologist Guillermo Ekholm and subsequent teams from the National Institute of Anthropology and History. What shocked researchers was not only the scale of the city, but the density of engineered platforms, artificial elevations, canals, and ceremonial structures hidden beneath layers of sediment. Some sections appeared intentionally raised to resist seasonal flooding. Others revealed evidence of long-term urban planning rather than random settlement growth. Over time, archaeologists uncovered more than 70 major mounds, stone monuments, carved sculptures, and sophisticated ceremonial zones that suggested Tamtok had once been a major intellectual and spiritual center of ancient Mexico. The most controversial mystery surrounding Tamtok involves its astronomical layout. Many of the city's principal structures appear deliberately aligned with solar events, particularly the sunrise positions during equinoxes and solstices. Researchers studying the orientation of plazas and ceremonial axes found angular deviations so small that they rivaled alignments seen at far more famous Mesoamerican sites such as Teotihuacan and Chichen Itza. This immediately raised a difficult question. How could the Huastec civilization achieve such precision without known advanced instruments? Unlike the Maya, the Huastec left behind very few surviving codices or mathematical texts. There are no surviving astronomical tables comparable to the Dresden Codex. Yet Tamtok suggests systematic sky observation over long periods of time. Some alignments correspond closely to solar cycles associated with agriculture, seasonal flooding, and ritual calendars. Archaeologists believe certain ceremonial pathways may have functioned as observational corridors, allowing priests to track the movement of celestial bodies across the horizon. The mystery becomes even deeper when comparing Tamtok to other ancient civilizations. At Stonehenge in England, solar alignment required generations of observation across open landscapes. At Machu Picchu in Peru, the Incas carved solar observation points directly into mountain stone. But Tamtok existed in a humid floodplain environment filled with vegetation, shifting soil, and unstable terrain. Maintaining accurate long-term astronomical reference points in such conditions should have been dramatically harder. Some researchers propose that the Huastec used elevated observation platforms combined with horizon markers placed at strategic points. Others believe the city's orientation reflects inherited astronomical knowledge passed through older Mesoamerican networks. Yet none of these explanations fully accounts for the consistency of the alignments across multiple structures. One of the most debated artifacts connected to this mystery is Monument 32, a carved stone slab discovered at the site. The monument contains circular depressions and symbolic patterns that some researchers interpret as representations of celestial cycles. Several theories suggest the markings could track Venus movements, lunar cycles, or ritual calendar intervals. Venus was extraordinarily important throughout Mesoamerica because its appearances were associated with war, agriculture, and divine timing. If Monument 32 truly encoded astronomical information, it would imply that the Huastec possessed a far more sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics than previously believed. Modern archaeoastronomy studies have attempted to reconstruct the ancient sky visible from Tamtok around 2,000 years ago. Simulations indicate that several key alignments would indeed correspond closely with significant solar events during that period, but whether these alignments were intentional scientific achievements or ritual symbolism remains fiercely debated. Another mystery that continues to puzzle researchers is how Tamtok survived in such a hostile hydrological environment. The Huasteca region experiences intense rainfall, periodic flooding, and unstable sediment conditions. Most earthwork settlements in similar climates erode rapidly over centuries, yet many of Tamtok's elevated platforms remain recognizable today after more than 2 millennia. Archaeologists discovered evidence that large portions of the city were artificially raised above the floodplain. Soil analysis revealed layered construction techniques using compacted earth mixed with varying sediment densities. Some specialists believe these layers acted similarly to primitive geotechnical stabilization systems, dispersing water pressure while reducing erosion. The engineering becomes even more impressive considering the scale involved. Several platforms measure dozens of meters across and required the movement of enormous quantities of soil without wheeled transport or draft animals. Researchers estimate that constructing the largest ceremonial mounds would have required coordinated labour forces operating over decades. Comparisons with other ancient flood control societies make the mystery even stranger. Mesopotamian cities depended heavily on canals and stone reinforcement. Ancient Egyptian settlements relied on predictable Nile flooding cycles, but Tamtok functioned within a tropical flood system far less stable and far more destructive. Some archaeologists argue that the Huastec may have developed localized environmental engineering methods specifically adapted to wetland conditions. Even today, modern civil engineering projects in floodplain regions require careful drainage calculations and soil stabilization techniques. The fact that ancient builders achieved long-term structural survival using mostly earth and organic materials continues to astonish specialists. Among the most visually disturbing discoveries at Tamtok are its enormous female stone sculptures. Unlike many Mesoamerican ceremonial centers dominated by warrior imagery or male rulers, Tamtok contains an unusually high concentration of female representations. Some statues weigh several tons and display anatomical proportions carved with surprising precision. This has led researchers to propose that Tamtok may have functioned as a ceremonial center linked to fertility, water worship, lunar cycles, or female deities connected to agriculture. Others believe the sculptures represent elite priestesses or dynastic figures rather than gods. But the greatest mystery is technological. The region surrounding Tamtok lacks abundant high-quality stone sources. Transporting multi-ton monuments across wet terrain without metal machinery would have been extraordinarily difficult. Some statues also display smooth surface finishing techniques that appear more advanced than expected from the available tools of the period. The problem mirrors debates seen at sites like Olmec San Lorenzo, where colossal basalt heads were transported over massive distances. Yet Tamtok remains even more puzzling because of its swamp-like environment. Researchers still cannot fully explain how these enormous sculptures were moved, erected, and preserved. What do you think Tamtok truly represents? A forgotten center of advanced ancient knowledge, or evidence that modern history has underestimated ancient civilizations for centuries? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Near the mountains of Fujairah in the United Arab Emirates, only a short distance from the Gulf of Oman, stands a tiny mud and stone structure known as Al-Bidya Mosque. It covers barely 53 square meters. There are no towering minarets, no massive marble courtyards, and no giant arches like those seen in Cairo, Istanbul, or Samarkand. Yet this small building may be one of the oldest surviving mosques in the UAE, and one of the strangest examples of ancient desert engineering ever preserved in Arabia. For centuries, scorching heat, salty sea air, seasonal humidity, and violent desert winds should have destroyed it. Its walls are made from local stone, mud bricks, and primitive plaster. Its roof relies on 4 low domes supported by a single central pillar. By normal engineering expectations, such a structure should have cracked, collapsed, or eroded long ago. But it did not. And that is where the mystery begins. Unlike famous archaeological discoveries uncovered beneath jungles or buried under desert sands, Al-Bidya Mosque was never truly lost. Local communities had known of it for generations. The mystery emerged when historians and archaeologists began studying how old the structure actually was and how such a small building could survive in such harsh conditions. The mosque sits beside ancient, defensive watchtowers and archaeological remains dating back centuries. Excavations around the site revealed pottery fragments, old habitation layers, and signs that this region had long been connected to Indian Ocean trade networks. Researchers believe merchants, sailors, and travelers moving between Persia, East Africa and the Arabian Peninsula may once have stopped here. Scientific studies later suggested the mosque could date back to around the 15th century, with some estimates centering near the year 1446. If correct, that would make it older than many surviving Gulf structures built with similar materials. Yet the greatest puzzle was not its age, it was its durability. The first thing engineers notice about Al-Bidya Mosque is its roof. Most Islamic domes distribute weight outward through large arches, thick supporting walls, or multiple columns, but Al-Bidya uses a radically compact design. 4 uneven domes rest above the prayer hall, all connected through a single interior support pillar. At first glance, the system appears primitive. In reality, it behaves more like a carefully balanced load distribution network. The domes are not perfectly symmetrical. The heights differ slightly. Their curvature changes subtly from one section to another. Modern structural analysts believe this asymmetry may actually reduce concentrated stress by distributing weight unevenly across the building rather than focusing pressure on one weak point. This is surprisingly advanced for a small rural structure built centuries ago with local materials. Even more unusual is the fact that the domes are relatively low. In large Islamic architecture, taller domes often symbolized grandeur and spiritual elevation. Here the opposite approach was used. Lower domes reduce horizontal thrust and improve stability during thermal expansion caused by extreme desert temperature swings. During summer in Fujairah, external temperatures can exceed 45 degrees Celsius. Stone surfaces exposed to direct sunlight can become dramatically hotter, while nighttime temperatures drop rapidly. These cycles create constant expansion and contraction stress in masonry. Large, unsupported domes often crack under these conditions. Al-Bidya's domes largely did not. That suggests the builders may have understood thermal behavior far better than previously assumed. This is the greatest mystery surrounding Al-Bidya Mosque. The building was constructed using materials that should not have survived this long. The walls contain combinations of local rocks, mud bricks, coral-derived material, and layers of lime-based plaster. In modern engineering terms, these are considered relatively weak materials, especially in coastal environments where salt infiltration accelerates erosion. Yet Al-Bidya remained standing for centuries while many newer Gulf structures disappeared completely. Researchers studying traditional Arabian construction techniques discovered something remarkable. Ancient builders across parts of the Gulf often used breathable plaster mixtures rather than rigid, sealed surfaces. These materials absorbed and released moisture gradually instead of trapping it inside walls. Modern concrete frequently fails in desert coastal climates because trapped salts crystallize internally, causing fractures over time. Ancient breathable plasters behave differently. They allow slow evaporation, reducing internal pressure buildup. This may partially explain Al-Bidya's survival, but it does not explain everything. Microscopic analysis of surviving traditional Gulf mortars has shown unusually dense mineral bonding in some historical mixtures. In several cases, ancient lime plasters demonstrated stronger long-term resistance to salt weathering than certain modern cement repairs later added during restoration attempts. That paradox shocked conservation specialists. In some regions of the Middle East, modern cement restorations have actually accelerated damage to ancient structures because cement traps moisture more aggressively than traditional lime mixtures. At Al-Bidya, the original builders may unknowingly have created a naturally adaptive climate-resistant system. The thickness of the walls also matters. Some sections exceed 0.5 meter in thickness, creating thermal inertia that slows heat transfer into the interior. Even without modern insulation, the mosque remains noticeably cooler inside compared to the outside environment. The small ventilation openings further complicate the mystery. They are positioned to allow airflow while minimizing direct sunlight penetration. Combined with the domed ceilings, the structure creates subtle convection circulation that helps regulate internal temperature. This resembles passive cooling principles now used in sustainable architecture. But Albidia achieved it centuries ago using only stone, mud, and geometry. Another strange feature is what the mosque does not have. There is no towering minaret. Many Islamic structures built after the medieval period included tall minarets for the call to prayer. Albidia instead remained compact and defensive in appearance, almost blending into the surrounding terrain. Some historians believe this reflected the realities of the region. Coastal settlements in the Gulf have faced tribal conflicts, pirate raids, and shifting trade instability for centuries. A lower structure would be harder to spot from long distances and more resistant to wind damage. Others think the design reflects an older regional architectural tradition before monumental Gulf mosque styles became dominant. No one knows for certain. The deeper researchers study Albidia Mosque, the less accidental its survival appears. Its thick walls reduce thermal stress, its domes distribute weight efficiently, its breathable materials resist salt damage, its low profile minimizes wind pressure, its ventilation openings improve cooling. Individually, none of these features seem revolutionary. Together, they form an integrated environmental adaptation system remarkably suited to one of the harshest climates on Earth. That raises an uncomfortable possibility. Ancient builders in this region may have possessed generations of practical environmental engineering knowledge that was never formally documented and was later lost as modern construction replaced traditional methods. In some ways, Albidia resembles other ancient structures around the world whose primitive materials outlasted supposedly superior modern systems. Roman marine concrete still survives after nearly 2,000 years in seawater. Certain Inca stone joints remain earthquake-resistant without mortar. Ancient Persian wind catchers cooled buildings naturally centuries before air conditioning. Albidia may belong to that same category of underestimated engineering, not because it was massive, but because it was intelligently adapted to its environment. What do you think made Albidia Mosque survive for centuries in one of the harshest environments on Earth? Was it lost engineering knowledge, brilliant adaptation to nature, or something we still do not fully understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Chan Chan Archaeological Zone emerged from the Peruvian desert only a few kilometers from modern Trujillo, where archaeologists in the 19th and early 20th centuries began uncovering massive adobe walls buried beneath centuries of wind-blown sand. What they discovered was shocking. An ancient city covering more than 20 square kilometers, making Chan Chan the largest adobe city ever built on Earth. Constructed by the Chimu civilization around 900 AD and later conquered by the Inca around 1470, the city should not have survived at all. The northern coast of Peru is repeatedly devastated by El Niño storms capable of dissolving mud brick architecture within days. Yet enormous sections of Chan Chan still stand after more than 700 years, and the engineering methods behind that survival remain one of archaeology's greatest unsolved mysteries. The first thing that confuses researchers is the material itself. Chan Chan was built almost entirely from adobe, sun-dried mud bricks generally considered weak compared to stone. In most environments, adobe erodes rapidly under heavy rain. However, some walls at Chan Chan still rise over 9 meters high with carvings that remain sharply visible. Modern analysis found that the Chimu likely mixed clay with crushed shell, mineral-rich sand, organic fibers, and fine gravel in highly specific ratios. Certain samples even display unusually dense internal bonding patterns, resembling primitive geopolymer reactions. Engineers have attempted to recreate similar mixtures, but many replicas deteriorate far faster than the originals. This has led some researchers to believe the Chimu possessed a lost formula for waterproof or self-stabilizing adobe centuries ahead of its time. The scale of construction creates even more questions. Experts estimate millions of adobe bricks were required to build Chan Chan's palaces, ceremonial compounds, storage complexes, and defensive walls. Unlike civilizations that relied on wheel transport or iron tools, the Chimu built this enormous city using basic hand tools and human labor. Yet the walls maintain strikingly straight alignments over long distances. Some corridors extend for hundreds of meters with only minimal deviation, suggesting sophisticated surveying methods. Archaeologists suspect the use of stretch chord measurement systems, standardized molds, and geometric planning techniques comparable in precision to systems used in ancient Egypt or Rome. One of the strangest mysteries involves the relief carvings covering the city's walls. Endless repeating patterns of fish, pelicans, waves, and fishing nets dominate the architecture. The carvings appear almost machine-made in their consistency. In several compounds, the same symbols repeat with nearly identical spacing across massive surfaces. Researchers still debate how such precision was maintained on fragile wet adobe before drying. Some believe the Chimu may have used reusable carved molds pressed directly into the walls, effectively creating a primitive form of industrial architectural replication. If true, Chan Chan may represent one of the earliest large-scale examples of standardized modular design in the ancient Americas. The city's urban layout is equally mysterious. Chan Chan was divided into enormous enclosed compounds known as ciudadelas, each functioning almost like a self-contained administrative fortress. Inside were ceremonial plazas, burial platforms, water reservoirs, warehouses, kitchens, and labyrinth-like passageways. Many entrances were deliberately narrow and designed to restrict movement. Some corridors force visitors through multiple sharp turns before reaching central courtyards, creating what modern architects compare to controlled access security systems. This suggests the Chimu elite carefully regulated the flow of goods, people, and information. Researchers are especially fascinated by the storage systems. Thousands of niches line the walls of storage rooms throughout the city. Some archaeologists estimate that Chan Chan once managed enough resources to support a population exceeding 30,000 people. The organization resembles a centralized economic machine rather than a traditional city. In some ways, it has been compared to the logistical complexity of later imperial capitals such as Forbidden City, or even modern warehouse distribution systems. Water engineering at Chan Chan remains one of its most advanced and poorly understood achievements. The Chimu built extensive canal systems that diverted water from the Moche River across desert terrain into the city. Several canals maintained extremely precise gradients over long distances, allowing stable water flow without destroying the channel walls through erosion. Hydrologists studying the site found some slopes accurate within fractions of a degree. Precision difficult to achieve even with basic modern surveying equipment. Similar hydraulic sophistication is often associated with Roman aqueducts, yet the Chimu developed their systems independently on another continent. The desert climate should have made large-scale urban survival nearly impossible. Northern coastal Peru receives minimal rainfall, while temperatures and humidity fluctuate dramatically. Yet Chan Chan appears designed to manipulate microclimates. Thick adobe walls absorb heat during the day and release it slowly at night, stabilizing interior temperatures. Narrow corridors reduce direct sunlight exposure while channeling cool ocean air through compounds. Some rooms maintain noticeably cooler temperatures even today. Modern architects studying passive climate engineering have compared aspects of Chan Chan's thermal regulation to Persian yakhchals and Middle Eastern wind tower systems. Another unexplained feature is the city's unusual acoustics. Certain ceremonial corridors amplify footsteps and echoes in ways that feel intentional. In some compounds, whispers can travel unexpectedly far along narrow passageways. Archaeologists believe the Chimu may have deliberately engineered sound effects for rituals or political ceremonies, similar to acoustic phenomena found at Chichen Itza, where echoes mimic the call of the sacred Quetzal bird. If intentional, this would mean the Chimu understood complex architectural acoustics centuries before formal acoustic science existed. The biggest threat to Chan Chan may have also shaped its engineering, El Niño. Geological evidence suggests massive flooding events repeatedly struck the region during the city's occupation. These storms could transform the desert into a destructive mud basin within days. Some researchers believe the Chimu constantly repaired and resurfaced walls using protective coatings now lost to time. Others argue they developed drainage systems and sacrificial outer layers designed specifically to absorb weather damage while preserving structural cores underneath. Certain walls show multiple construction layers, almost like engineered protective shells added over generations. Archaeologists also discovered evidence of one of the darkest rituals in ancient American history near Chan Chan. In 2018, researchers confirmed the remains of more than 140 sacrificed children and over 200 llamas at nearby Huanchaquito Las Lamas. The children, estimated to be between 5 and 14 years old, showed cut marks across the chest consistent with ritual heart extraction. DNA analysis revealed they came from different regions of the Chimu kingdom, suggesting a massive organized state ritual rather than isolated sacrifice. Many scholars believe catastrophic El Niño floods triggered the ceremony as an attempt to appease supernatural forces controlling weather and the sea. Do you think the Chimu discovered an ancient engineering technique that modern science still cannot fully reproduce? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. On the eastern coast of the Black Sea, only a few kilometers from modern Batumi, the massive stone walls of Gonyo Fortress rise from one of the wettest regions in the Caucasus. Archaeologists believe the fortress was originally built during the Roman expansion into Colchis around the 1st century CE, though deeper excavation layers suggest the site may be significantly older. The first major excavations in the 19th century uncovered Roman pottery, bronze coins, military barracks, drainage channels, and unusually advanced defensive structures. Later, Soviet-era surveys revealed underground tunnels and hidden construction layers beneath the visible Roman walls. Every excavation season seemed to expose something unexpected: older foundations, unexplained engineering solutions, or materials surviving far beyond their expected lifespan. Today, Gonyo Fortress remains one of the least understood Roman frontier fortresses ever discovered around the Black Sea. One of the first mysteries surrounding Gonyo is its survival itself. The fortress was constructed close to marshy coastal terrain, with heavy rainfall exceeding 2,000 millimeters annually in some years. Ancient fortifications built in such wet environments usually suffer severe foundation collapse after centuries. Yet large portions of Gonyo's walls remain standing after nearly 2,000 years. Some wall sections are almost 5 meters thick and consist of massive basalt and limestone blocks fitted together with remarkable precision. Modern structural engineers studying the site found that the foundations distribute pressure unusually evenly, despite the unstable soil underneath. Certain lower layers appear to contain compacted gravel drainage beds, similar to techniques used in advanced Roman hydraulic construction. What makes this puzzling is location. Gonio stood at the far eastern edge of Roman influence, thousands of kilometers from Rome itself. Comparable engineering sophistication is usually associated with major Roman centers like Colosseum or the aqueduct systems of Segovia Aqueduct, not remote military outposts near the Caucasus Mountains. Some researchers argue that Roman engineers may have reused older local engineering knowledge already present in Colchis long before Roman occupation. During 20th century excavations, archaeologists uncovered one of the most surprising discoveries beneath the fortress: a sophisticated underground drainage network. The channels were constructed with baked clay pipes and carefully angled stone conduits, designed to remove rainwater rapidly from the interior. Measurements showed that some drainage slopes deviated by only a few millimeters over long distances. Even modern gravity-based drainage systems rely on similar precision. The mystery becomes deeper when climate data is considered. The eastern Black Sea coast experiences intense seasonal storms and extremely high humidity. Without efficient water management, a fortress of this scale would slowly collapse from erosion and internal flooding. Yet parts of Gonio's drainage system still function today. Researchers compared the hydraulic planning at Gonio with Roman systems discovered at Pompeii and Ephesus. The similarities were striking, especially in the use of layered sediment traps and runoff control. But unlike Pompeii or Ephesus, Gonio was never considered a major engineering center of the Roman world. That contradiction remains unexplained. Excavations in different sectors of the fortress repeatedly produced evidence that complicated the accepted history of the site. Early digs uncovered Roman military artifacts, including spearheads, armor fragments, and coins from the reign of Emperor Hadrian. Later excavations revealed Byzantine modifications, including reinforced towers and redesigned gate systems. Ottoman-era ceramics and firing positions were found in upper layers. But beneath all of those layers, archaeologists discovered something far more controversial: deeper stone foundations predating Roman occupation. Carbon dating of organic material trapped within some lower construction layers suggested parts of the site could date centuries earlier than the Roman fortress itself. Some pottery fragments resembled artifacts linked to the ancient Colchian civilization, the same civilization associated with Greek legends surrounding Jason and the Golden Fleece. If these findings are correct, the Romans may not have built Gonio from scratch. Instead, they may have expanded an already ancient stronghold whose original builders remain unknown. Gonio Fortress follows an almost perfectly rectangular layout covering roughly 4.5 hectares. 18 defensive towers were positioned around the perimeter with highly consistent spacing. Military historians studying the fortress noticed something unusual about the tower arrangement. The placement creates overlapping visual and projectile coverage zones, minimizing blind spots around the walls. In practical terms, defenders could attack approaching enemies from multiple angles simultaneously. This principle resembles the interlocking fields of fire concept widely used in early modern European fortress design more than 1,000 years later. The geometry also suggests advanced surveying capability. Creating near-perfect alignment across such a large structure without modern optical equipment would have required extremely accurate measurement methods. Roman surveyors were certainly skilled, but some archaeologists argue that Gonio demonstrates a level of regional military planning rarely seen in frontier fortresses. Another major mystery involves the durability of the fortress materials themselves. Gonio lies close to the Black Sea, where salty air, heavy rain, biological growth, and humidity rapidly destroy exposed stone structures. Many medieval fortifications in similar climates deteriorated severely within only a few centuries. Yet portions of Gonio's original masonry remain remarkably intact after nearly 2 millennia. Material analysis performed on mortar residues found traces of volcanic ash compounds rich in silica and aluminum. Some researchers compared the mixture to Roman pozzolanic concrete, famous for its ability to resist water damage. Roman marine concrete has survived over 2,000 years in Mediterranean harbours because of chemical reactions between volcanic minerals and seawater. The problem is geography. High-quality volcanic pozzolana sources were concentrated mainly around Italy. Scientists still debate how similar material technology may have appeared in a distant Caucasus fortress. Some theories suggest local engineers independently developed similar mixtures using regional volcanic sediments from the Caucasus volcanic belt. Others believe Roman military engineers transported specialized knowledge across the empire more effectively than historians once believed. Modern ground-penetrating radar surveys detected hidden cavities beneath sections of the fortress that remain unexcavated. Some of these underground spaces appear connected through narrow corridors running below the walls. Their exact purpose remains unknown. Possibilities include emergency escape tunnels, military storage chambers, hidden water reservoirs, or secret communication routes. The difficulty is that many sections are partially flooded or structurally unstable. Even with modern imaging technology, archaeologists still cannot fully map the underground network. Several unexplored anomalies continue appearing in geophysical scans, suggesting that significant portions of Gonio may still lie buried beneath centuries of sediment. The fortress is also linked to one of Christianity's oldest traditions. Local belief claims that the tomb of Saint Matthias, one of the 12 apostles of Jesus, lies somewhere within Gonio. No confirmed archaeological evidence has verified the claim, yet the tradition persisted for centuries across Byzantine and Georgian sources. Excavations near the supposed burial area uncovered ancient graves and religious structures, but nothing conclusively tied to Saint Matthias himself. This overlap between military engineering and sacred legend adds another layer to the mystery of the site. What do you think was the greatest mystery hidden inside Gonio Fortress? The advanced engineering, the underground tunnels, or evidence of an older lost civilization beneath the Roman walls? Share your thoughts in the comments below. On the southwestern edge of Orongo, where cliffs plunge more than 300 meters into the Pacific Ocean and volcanic winds strike with almost uninterrupted force, an ancient ceremonial village was built in a place many engineers today would consider irrational. Perched directly on the rim of the Ranokau crater, Orongo remains one of the most mysterious archaeological sites in Polynesia. What makes the site extraordinary is not massive pyramids or giant temples, but something far harder to explain. A small isolated society appears to have mastered environmental engineering techniques centuries ahead of what researchers expected from a remote oceanic culture. Even today, archaeologists, geologists, and structural engineers continue debating how its stone architecture survived one of the harshest coastal environments on Earth. Orongo first drew serious scientific attention in the 19th century when European explorers documented strange low stone houses and hundreds of petroglyphs carved into volcanic rock overlooking the sea. Systematic archaeological work expanded during the 20th century, particularly through investigations by Catherine Routledge in the early 1900s and later expeditions led by William Malloy. Excavations revealed that Orongo was not an ordinary settlement, but the ceremonial centre of the Birdman cult, a powerful ritual system that dominated Rapa Nui society after the decline of the Moai building era. The village sits beside the crater lake of Ranokau, one of the island's main freshwater sources, while directly facing the offshore islets Motu Nui, Motu Iti and Motu Kau Kau. This location alone created a logistical paradox. The terrain combines unstable volcanic slopes, violent ocean winds, salt corrosion, seismic activity, and dangerous elevation changes. Yet Orongo's structures endured for centuries with surprising structural stability. The first great mystery surrounding Orongo is its improbable construction site. Most ancient coastal settlements were built in protected harbours or valleys where resources and shelter were easier to secure. Orongo was built at the exact opposite extreme. Wind speed around the crater rim can exceed 80 km per hour during storm conditions, while the cliffside experiences constant salt-laden air capable of accelerating stone erosion. Geological surveys have shown that the volcanic tuff and basalt around the crater are highly fractured and vulnerable to long-term weathering. In practical engineering terms, this should have been a poor place for durable architecture. Yet dozens of ceremonial houses survived long enough to remain identifiable centuries later. Researchers comparing Orongo to other Polynesian settlements noticed something remarkable. The village appears intentionally designed to cooperate with the environment instead of resisting it directly. This becomes most visible in what many experts consider Orongo's greatest unsolved technological mystery: its wind-resistant and earthquake-resistant architecture. The houses at Orongo are extremely low to the ground, often only a little over 1 meter high internally. Early explorers incorrectly assumed the buildings reflected primitive limitations. Modern structural analysis suggests the opposite. Their low aerodynamic profile dramatically reduced lateral wind pressure. Instead of presenting vertical walls to the ocean winds, the structures hugged the terrain like stone shells. Some engineers compare the concept to partially buried military bunkers or aerodynamic storm-resistant shelters used in modern extreme weather regions. The roofing system is even more astonishing. The roofs were formed using overlapping basalt slabs arranged into corbel-like vaults. This technique distributed compressive loads outward while minimizing structural weak points. In seismic engineering, low center of gravity structures perform better during ground movement because they reduce overturning forces. Rapa Nui lies in a tectonically active region connected to volcanic processes, meaning ancient builders likely experienced periodic tremors. The architecture at Orongo unintentionally, nor perhaps intentionally, follows principles similar to anti-seismic construction used thousands of years later in earthquake-prone civilizations. What makes this difficult to explain is the technological context. The Rapa Nui people possessed no iron tools, no wheeled transport, and no draft animals, yet many basalt slabs used in the roofs weigh hundreds of kilograms. Transporting them uphill across volcanic slopes would have required coordinated labour, advanced planning, and deep understanding of stone balancing techniques. Experimental archaeology has attempted to replicate similar transportation methods using ropes and wooden sled systems, but the energy requirements remain enormous relative to the island's small population estimates. Some researchers believe Orongo's builders possessed highly specialized construction knowledge passed through generations, knowledge later lost after societal collapse and European contact. Another extraordinary feature is the precision of water management around the crater edge. Heavy Pacific rainfall can rapidly destabilize volcanic slopes through runoff erosion. However, surveys of Orongo revealed carefully integrated drainage patterns between structures. Stone channels appear positioned to redirect water away from foundations while minimizing soil displacement. Similar environmental adaptation techniques are seen in Inca mountain architecture at sites like Machu Picchu, where drainage engineering was critical to slope stability. The difference is scale. The Inca Empire possessed enormous labor resources and continental infrastructure. Rapa Nui was an isolated island thousands of kilometers from major civilizations. That comparison makes Orongo's engineering even more difficult to contextualize historically. The second major mystery involves the hundreds of petroglyphs carved throughout the ceremonial complex. Orongo contains one of the densest concentrations of rock art in Polynesia, especially depictions of Tangata Manu, the birdman figure central to the island's ritual system. Many carvings were etched into hard basalt surfaces using only stone tools. Some display surprisingly smooth curvature and proportional consistency. Replication experiments conducted by archaeologists demonstrated how time-consuming such carvings would have been with obsidian or basalt chisels. Yet the sheer number of petroglyphs suggests long-term organized artistic production. Several glyphs align visually with the offshore islet Motu Nui and with seasonal solar positions. This has led some archaeoastronomers to suspect Orongo also functioned as a ritual observation center linked to celestial cycles. Polynesian navigators already possessed advanced oceanic navigation skills based on stars, currents, wave reflection patterns, and bird migration. Some scholars believe the Birdman ceremonies may have incorporated astronomical timing systems connected to seabird migration seasons. If true, Orongo may represent a fusion of religious architecture, environmental engineering, and observational astronomy within a single ceremonial landscape. The Birdman ritual itself introduces another layer of mystery. Competitors descended nearly vertical cliffs from Orongo to the ocean below, then swam through shark-filled waters to Motu Nui in search of the first Manutara egg of the season. The winner's sponsor became the island's ceremonial leader for the year. From a survival perspective, the ritual bordered on suicidal, yet it continued for generations. Oceanographers studying the currents around Ranokau describe the waters as highly unpredictable due to wave reflection from volcanic cliffs and shifting Pacific swells. Successfully completing the journey required extraordinary physical endurance and intimate knowledge of marine conditions. This suggests the Rapa Nui possessed sophisticated practical understanding of seasonal weather systems and ocean dynamics long before modern meteorology existed. One of the deepest mysteries connected to Orongo involves the possibility of symbolic communication systems linked to Rongorongo, the undeciphered script of Rapa Nui. Some Birdman imagery resembles motifs found on surviving Rongorongo tablets. If Rongorongo represents a true writing system rather than symbolic memory aids, then Rapa Nui may have independently developed one of the few known scripts in human history without direct influence from major literate civilizations. That possibility would radically reshape assumptions about intellectual development in isolated Polynesian societies. Unfortunately, most Rongorongo artifacts were lost during colonial disruption, disease outbreaks, and missionary destruction in the 19th century, leaving researchers with too little material for complete decipherment. What do you think Orongo truly represents? A forgotten engineering breakthrough, a lost ceremonial science, or evidence that the ancient Rapa Nui understood nature far better than we realize today? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Above the Azani Valley in eastern Georgia, the ruins of Nakrisi Monastery have survived earthquakes, freezing winters, and nearly 1,500 years of erosion. But the real mystery is not why the monastery still stands. It is how its builders possessed engineering techniques that, in some cases, resemble technologies rediscovered only in the modern era. Although the monastery was known locally for centuries, major archaeological investigations began during the 20th century when Soviet-era researchers uncovered older structures buried beneath the Christian complex. Excavations revealed traces of pre-Christian temples, advanced drainage systems, unusual mortar compounds, and hidden architectural layers dating as far back as late antiquity. What initially appeared to be a simple medieval monastery slowly became one of the most technically puzzling ancient sites in the Caucasus region. One of the first mysteries surrounding Nakrisi involves its survival against seismic activity. The monastery sits near tectonically active zones connected to the Greater Caucasus Mountains, where earthquakes have repeatedly damaged settlements throughout history. Yet large portions of Nakrisi remain standing while many nearby structures collapsed over the centuries. Modern geological surveys discovered that the builders did not use a simple stone foundation. Instead, they created layered substructures composed of crushed rock, compacted soil, lime mortar, and porous filler materials capable of dispersing seismic vibration. Engineers comparing the structure to Roman anti-seismic construction methods found striking similarities to techniques used in parts of ancient Italy nearly 1,000 kilometers away. What makes this more mysterious is the presence of volcanic ash compounds inside some mortar samples. Pozzolanic materials are famous for strengthening Roman concrete because they chemically react with lime and water to form durable crystalline bonds. The problem is that eastern Georgia has no major nearby volcanic ash source capable of easily supplying such material during late antiquity. Researchers still debate whether these compounds were imported through ancient Persian trade routes or produced using a lost regional formula. Either explanation raises difficult questions. Transporting large quantities of specialized material into mountainous terrain during the 4th or 5th century would have required a surprisingly organized logistical system. Another unexplained feature involves temperature regulation. Summers in Kakiti can exceed 35 degrees Celsius, while winters regularly fall below freezing. Despite this, several chambers within the monastery maintain unusually stable internal temperatures throughout the year. Thermal imaging studies revealed hollow air channels concealed inside thick stone walls. These cavities appear to create natural airflow circulation, similar to modern passive ventilation systems. Warm air rises through narrow vertical shafts, while cooler air is pulled through lower openings, stabilizing temperatures without mechanical assistance. This principle resembles the Badgir wind catchers of ancient Persia and the cooling systems used in desert yakhchals. However, Nakrisi exists in a completely different environmental setting. The Caucasus climate is colder and wetter than the Iranian plateau, making the adaptation of such techniques highly unusual. Some architectural historians believe the builders may have inherited engineering knowledge through contact with Persian craftsmen during periods of Sasanian influence. Others argue the system evolved independently. Either way, the sophistication of the airflow design exceeds what historians once assumed about early medieval Caucasian architecture. The greatest technological mystery at Nakrisi may be its mortar. For decades, scientists studying the monastery noticed that certain sections of masonry showed extraordinary resistance to moisture and cracking. While ordinary medieval mortar often weakens after centuries of freeze-thaw cycles, parts of Nakrisi's original binding material remain remarkably stable even after roughly 1,500 years of exposure. Microscopic analysis revealed dense crystalline structures forming inside the mortar over time. Instead of simply decaying, the material appears to continue chemically evolving centuries after its original creation. This phenomenon has drawn comparisons to Roman pozzolanic concrete, used in harbours such as Caesarea and Portus, where ancient marine structures sometimes outperform modern cement in saltwater conditions. Researchers discovered traces of lime, volcanic minerals, finely crushed ceramics, and possibly organic additives mixed into the Nakrisi mortar. Some samples also contain microscopic reactions suggesting self-healing behavior. When small fractures form, dissolved minerals slowly recrystallize inside the cracks, partially sealing the damage naturally. Modern engineers have attempted to reproduce similar compounds in laboratory conditions, yet no recreation has perfectly matched the durability of the original material. Even slight changes in mineral ratios dramatically alter the mortar's strength and moisture resistance. What makes this especially mysterious is the level of practical chemistry required. Producing stable lime mortar alone already demands precise temperature control during limestone burning. Adding volcanic compounds or ceramic particles in exact ratios implies generations of accumulated experimentation. Yet almost no written records survive explaining how Caucasian builders developed or transmitted this knowledge. The mystery becomes even deeper when compared with modern Portland cement. Although modern concrete can achieve enormous compressive strength, it often deteriorates within 50 to 100 years under severe environmental stress. Some sections of Nakrisi's mortar have already survived more than 15 centuries. To some material scientists, the monastery represents evidence that ancient builders may have mastered long-term durability better than many industrial systems today. The monastery's main chapel also displays strange acoustic behavior. Researchers conducting low-frequency sound tests discovered that the curved stone vault amplifies chanting far more efficiently than expected for a relatively small chamber. Specific frequencies resonate through the structure with unusual clarity, creating the illusion of a much larger interior space. Acoustic engineers found that the geometry of the walls reduces echo distortion while enhancing vocal depth. Similar effects are famous in Byzantine cathedrals such as Hagia Sophia, yet Nicosia achieved related acoustic complexity on a much smaller scale. Some historians believe the effect was accidental. Others argue it was intentionally engineered for religious ceremonies. If deliberate, the builders possessed a surprisingly advanced empirical understanding of sound wave behavior centuries before formal acoustic science existed. Perhaps the most controversial discovery at Nicosia lies beneath the Christian complex itself. Excavations uncovered evidence of an earlier fire temple possibly linked to Zoroastrian practices during periods of Persian control over eastern Georgia. Archaeologists identified ritual fire platforms and carefully designed smoke ventilation systems capable of maintaining combustion in enclosed spaces. The ventilation channels are unusually efficient for such an ancient structure. Oxygen flow appears to have been carefully regulated to sustain ritual flames continuously without filling the chambers with smoke. Similar engineering principles can be observed in sophisticated Persian fire temples much further south. This discovery transformed Nicosia from a purely Christian monument into evidence of overlapping civilizations, religions, and technological traditions. The monastery may represent a rare architectural bridge between Persian engineering and early Christian Caucasian construction. Geophysical surveys have detected underground anomalies beneath Nicosia Monastery, leading researchers to suspect the existence of buried tunnels, storage chambers, or ancient ritual passages. Even more mysterious, some of these structures appear aligned with the position of the sun during equinoxes and solstices, similar to ceremonial sites found across Eurasia. Because the hillside remains structurally fragile, full excavation has never been completed, leaving the underground secrets of Nicosia unsolved to this day. Do you think the builders of Nicosia Monastery truly possessed engineering knowledge far ahead of their time, or are these mysteries still hiding a deeper explanation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. On the rocky highlands of northern Axum, far above the dry valleys of East Africa, lies one of the least understood hydraulic systems of the ancient world. The civilization of Axum built enormous reservoirs capable of storing vast amounts of water nearly 2,000 years ago, in an environment where seasonal rain could destroy entire settlements within hours. What makes the mystery even stranger is not simply that these reservoirs existed, but that many of them held water with remarkable efficiency despite being carved into porous volcanic ground. Even today, archaeologists and engineers still debate the same unsettling question. How did the Axumites waterproof massive reservoirs centuries before modern hydraulic engineering existed? The reservoirs of Axum attracted scientific attention during 19th century European expeditions into Ethiopia, but serious archaeological investigation expanded during the 20th century as researchers began mapping the ruins of the ancient kingdom of Axum. Among the most important discoveries was the reservoir known as Mai-Shum, located near the ancient royal city. Excavations revealed carefully shaped embankments, stone retaining walls, drainage channels, and signs of large-scale hydraulic planning. Later surveys using satellite mapping and topographic analysis suggested that Mai-Shum may once have been connected to a broader network of canals and runoff control systems extending across the surrounding plateau. One of the first mysteries surrounding the Axum reservoirs is the sheer difficulty of building such structures in northern Ethiopia's terrain. The region experiences extreme seasonal variation. During the rainy season, torrential downpours can rapidly flood valleys and erode hillsides, while during the dry season, water becomes scarce for months at a time. Ancient societies living in similar environments often relied on small cisterns or direct river access. Yet the Axumites attempted something more ambitious: large-scale water storage integrated into an urban centre. Modern hydrologists studying the region estimate that seasonal runoff across the Axum Plateau can accelerate dramatically because of the steep volcanic slopes. Without carefully designed spillways and overflow systems, reservoir walls would quickly fail under pressure, yet archaeological evidence suggests these reservoirs remained functional for centuries. The Meisham Reservoir alone measures several dozen meters across and was capable of holding thousands of cubic meters of water. That scale places it closer to the engineered hydraulic systems of Petra, Roman North Africa, and the ancient South Arabian kingdoms than to most settlements in sub-Saharan Africa during the same period. What shocks many researchers is that Axum achieved this without the extensive concrete technology used by the Romans. Instead, the builders relied heavily on stonework, earth compaction, and careful terrain manipulation. Some engineers comparing Axumite construction to later medieval reservoirs concluded that even a slight miscalculation in wall angle or soil compression would have caused catastrophic leakage or structural collapse after repeated rainy seasons. The survival of parts of these reservoirs for nearly 2 millennia strongly suggests an advanced understanding of hydraulic pressure, erosion control, and load distribution. This remains the most debated question of all. Constructing a reservoir is already difficult, but preventing one from leaking in fractured volcanic terrain is vastly more complicated. The geology around Axum consists largely of volcanic rock and dry soils, prone to cracking under pressure and temperature change. In modern engineering, terrain like this often requires synthetic liners, cement stabilization, or layered clay barriers to reduce seepage. Yet the Axumites possessed none of these technologies in their modern form, and still archaeological evidence suggests that several reservoirs retained water with surprising efficiency. Researchers studying sediment layers inside Meisham discovered unusually compacted strata along portions of the reservoir floor. Some archaeologists believe the Axumites intentionally lined sections with dense clay imported from nearby valleys, while others argue they may have mixed volcanic ash with wet soil to create a primitive waterproofing compound similar in principle to the pozzolanic reactions later used in Roman hydraulic concrete. The comparison with Roman engineering is unavoidable. Roman harbours near Portus used volcanic ash mixtures that chemically hardened underwater, allowing ports and seawalls to survive for centuries. Ethiopia also contains volcanic materials rich in minerals capable of improving water resistance when compacted correctly. However, no definitive waterproofing formula has ever been identified at Axum, leaving the exact method unknown. Another theory involves natural sediment sealing. Some hydrologists suggest the reservoirs may initially have leaked, but over decades, microscopic sediment particles carried by seasonal runoff gradually filled pores in the ground, naturally forming semi-waterproof layers. The problem with this explanation is that several reservoir walls appear intentionally engineered long before such natural sealing could realistically occur. Even more puzzling is the stability of the embankments themselves. Water pressure constantly weakens retaining walls through erosion and internal seepage. Yet portions of Axumite retaining structures still survive, despite earthquakes, seasonal flooding, and centuries of neglect. This has led some engineers to suspect the builders understood far more about permeability and drainage control than previously assumed. Certain channels around the reservoirs appear positioned specifically to redirect excess water away from structural pressure points, a principle remarkably similar to relief drainage systems used in modern dam engineering. The mystery becomes even more impressive when compared to other ancient civilizations. The Nabateans at Petra mastered desert water capture, the Maya at Tikal built limestone reservoirs in tropical climates, and the Romans engineered aqueducts stretching across continents. Yet Aksum combined multiple engineering challenges simultaneously: unstable volcanic terrain, violent seasonal rainfall, high-altitude topography, and long dry periods. Some archaeologists now argue that the sophistication of Aksumite hydraulic engineering has been underestimated simply because ancient African engineering historically received far less global attention than Rome or Egypt. The reservoirs themselves may only represent one visible part of a much larger hydraulic system. Archaeological surveys around Aksum identified traces of channels, runoff pathways, and terraced landforms likely connected to water management, suggesting the reservoirs were integrated into broader agricultural planning rather than functioning as isolated structures. Some channels were positioned at angles that naturally reduced water velocity before runoff entered the main reservoirs. In modern fluid engineering, reducing kinetic energy is essential because uncontrolled inflow can destabilize embankments and rapidly accelerate erosion. The surprising part is how accurately the Aksumites adapted their systems to the surrounding landscape. Without laser surveying tools, satellite mapping, or modern geology, they still created hydraulic structures capable of surviving powerful environmental stresses. Certain researchers compared the planning logic to the terraced hydraulic systems of Moray and the mountain water control systems of ancient Yemen. The difference is that Aksum operated on a volcanic plateau where unpredictable rainfall patterns made water management even more dangerous and technically demanding. Many historians believe the reservoirs were directly connected to Aksum's rise as one of the greatest powers of the ancient world. Between the 1st and 7th centuries CE, the Kingdom of Aksum controlled major trade routes linking East Africa, the Red Sea, Arabia, and parts of the Mediterranean world. The empire minted coins, constructed enormous stone stelae, and maintained large urban populations, none of which would have been sustainable without stable access to water. Some historical estimates suggest Aksum at its peak supported tens of thousands of inhabitants in an environment naturally vulnerable to drought. That level of urban density required reliable storage systems capable of surviving repeated seasonal cycles. In this interpretation, the reservoirs were not simply infrastructure, they were the technological foundation of imperial power itself. Without hydraulic control, Aksum may never have developed into a dominant commercial kingdom capable of competing with Rome, Persia, and South Arabian states. What do you think the Aksumites truly understood about water engineering nearly 2,000 years ago? Was this lost technology far more advanced than we realize, or are we still missing a crucial piece of the puzzle? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Shunet el-Zabib stands in the desert plain of Abydos in southern Egypt, roughly 500 kilometers south of Cairo. Archaeologists believe it was built around 2700 BCE during the reign of Pharaoh Khasikhemwy, the last ruler of Egypt's second dynasty. The structure was first seriously documented in the 19th century, but only modern excavations revealed how enormous and technologically advanced it truly was. Hidden beneath drifting sand were walls still standing more than 11 meters high, despite being built mostly from mud brick over 5,000 years ago. What researchers uncovered was not simply another ruined enclosure. It appeared to be a missing evolutionary step between the earliest royal tomb complexes and the later Pyramid Age that transformed Egypt forever. The greatest mystery surrounding Shunet el-Zabib is its survival. The enclosure measures roughly 137 meters long and 77 meters wide, with walls nearly 5 meters thick in some areas. It was constructed from an estimated several million mud bricks. Under normal environmental conditions, sun-dried mud brick architecture deteriorates rapidly. Rain, salt crystallization, thermal expansion, and desert wind erosion slowly reduce ancient mud brick cities to flattened mounds within centuries. Yet Shunet el-Zebib still stands after more than 50 centuries. Researchers studying the surviving bricks discovered unusually dense manufacturing methods. Many bricks contain finely chopped straw fibers distributed with remarkable consistency, reducing shrinkage cracks during drying. Some analyses also suggest the presence of mineral-rich clay mixtures with high silica content that increased durability. The wall cores were packed extremely tightly, while outer layers appear engineered to absorb stress and prevent catastrophic cracking. What makes this extraordinary is the timeline. Comparable large-scale earthen engineering projects with similar durability would not appear until much later civilizations. In Peru, advanced adobe compounds emerged thousands of years afterward. Roman concrete, famous for its longevity, would not appear for another 2 millennia. Modern compressed earth architecture uses stabilization chemistry and engineering models unavailable to ancient Egypt. Yet somehow, builders at Shunet el-Zebib achieved structural endurance rivaling many later stone monuments. Even more mysterious is the wall design itself. The outer facade contains deep recessed niches repeating across the enclosure. Egyptologists once believed these were decorative imitations of palace architecture, but some engineers argue the recessed geometry may also have distributed thermal stress across the wall surface. By interrupting flat expansion zones, the structure may have reduced long fracture lines caused by desert temperature shifts that can exceed 30 degrees Celsius between day and night. If true, this would represent a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of structural behavior for one of the world's earliest royal monuments. The scale of organization behind Shunet el-Zebib raises another major mystery. Egypt at the time was still emerging from its early unification period. Large centralized bureaucracies were only beginning to form. Yet constructing this enclosure required labor coordination on a level previously considered impossible for the era. Millions of bricks had to be produced with relatively standardized dimensions. Clay had to be extracted, transported, mixed with water and organic material, molded, dried, and stacked in precise sequences. Massive quantities of water were necessary despite the surrounding desert environment. Workers needed food supply systems, transportation networks, and construction supervision. Archaeologists estimate that large sections of the enclosure may have required thousands of laborers operating in organized teams. This resembles the logistical systems later associated with the Old Kingdom pyramid builders centuries afterward. The mystery becomes even deeper when comparing Shunet el-Zebib to the step pyramid complex of Djoser at Saqqara. Many architectural concepts appear strikingly similar despite the chronological gap. Some researchers believe the enclosure represents an experimental phase in royal monument construction, essentially a prototype for the Pyramid Age itself. Without sites like Shunet el-Zebib, Egypt may never have developed the engineering confidence required to attempt massive stone pyramids. One reason Shunet el-Zebib fascinates archaeologists is because it appears technologically transitional. Earlier royal tombs in Egypt were relatively modest mastabas, while later monuments became gigantic stone complexes dominated by pyramids. Shunet el-Zebib sits directly between those worlds. The enclosure already demonstrates monumental scale, symbolic royal architecture, ritual spatial planning, controlled ceremonial access, and massive perimeter construction. These are exactly the principles later perfected at Saqqara and Giza. Many Egyptologists believe the famous architect Imhotep may have inherited concepts originally developed at Abydos. The enclosure walls at Shunet el Zerbib strongly resemble the niche facades later reproduced in stone around Djoser's step pyramid complex. Even the idea of a sacred royal enclosure separated from the outside world appears nearly identical. This raises a profound historical question. Were Egypt's greatest architectural breakthroughs invented gradually through experimental mud brick engineering long before the first pyramid stones were placed? If so, Shunet el Zerbib may represent the lost laboratory where pyramid architecture was born. Despite decades of excavation, scholars still debate the actual purpose of the structure. It is commonly described as a funerary enclosure associated with Khafre-Khimwi's tomb at el Ka'ab nearby. However, the scale seems disproportionate compared to its understood function. Unlike pyramids, the enclosure contains no massive central burial chamber. Its interior space appears unusually open. Evidence suggests ceremonies occurred there, but exactly what kind remains unclear. Some theories suggest the enclosure hosted royal renewal rituals similar to the Sed festival, a ceremony connected to kingship and divine authority. Others argue it symbolized a palace for the afterlife, allowing the deceased ruler's spirit to continue existing ceremonially after death. A more controversial interpretation proposes that the complex functioned partly as a cosmic symbolic structure aligned with religious geography. Abydos itself was one of the holiest locations in ancient Egypt long before Giza became dominant. The region later became associated with Osiris, god of the dead. Some researchers suspect the enclosure's placement within the sacred landscape carried astronomical or theological significance still poorly understood today. The lack of definitive inscriptions only deepens the mystery. For such a colossal royal project, Shunet el Zerbib remains strangely silent. Near the enclosure, archaeologists discovered several buried wooden boats dating to the same general period. Some exceeded 20 meters in length. These vessels are among the oldest large-scale ritual boats ever found in Egypt. Their existence creates another technological puzzle. Egypt lacked abundant large timber resources. Constructing boats of this scale required advanced woodworking, long-distance material acquisition, and sophisticated hull design. Cedar wood may have been imported from the Levant hundreds of kilometers away, implying extensive trade networks already existed during Egypt's early dynastic age. Boat construction also required understanding load distribution, joint reinforcement, waterproofing, and river navigation mechanics. This challenges older assumptions that advanced Egyptian engineering suddenly appeared during the Pyramid Age. Instead, Shunet el Zerbib suggests technological complexity had already been developing for generations. Some archaeologists believe these boats symbolized the king's journey through the afterlife. Others think they may have been functional ceremonial vessels used on the Nile before burial. Either way, they reveal a civilization already capable of coordinating surprisingly advanced maritime engineering over 4,700 years ago. Perhaps the strangest aspect of Shunet el Zerbib is that many of its features imitate later stone architecture, even though the structure itself was made from mud brick. The recessed facade design, monumental symmetry, enclosed ceremonial courts, and massive perimeter walls all resemble concepts later executed in limestone during the Third Dynasty. In some ways, the builders appear to have imagined monumental stone architecture before Egypt possessed the full technological ability to construct it on a national scale. This reverses the normal pattern seen in architectural history. Usually material capability comes first, followed by stylistic evolution. At Shunet el Zerbib, the symbolic architectural vision may have emerged before the engineering infrastructure fully existed to realize it. That possibility changes how historians view early Egypt entirely. Instead of a sudden pyramid revolution, Egypt's greatest monuments may have evolved through centuries of experimentation hidden inside structures like this one. Inside the ancient temple complex of Lapakshi in southern India, a massive stone pillar hangs slightly above the ground without fully touching it. For nearly 500 years, the structure surrounding it has remained standing, and modern engineers still cannot fully explain why the temple works at all. The temple was constructed during the 16th century under the Vijayanagara Empire, but Lapakshi became globally famous during the British colonial era, when engineers discovered that one of its giant granite pillars could not fully touch the floor. Attempts to study the pillar reportedly caused slight displacement inside the structure itself, transforming the site into one of the most mysterious engineering puzzles in India. The most famous mystery inside Lapakshi is the so-called hanging pillar. Out of nearly 70 giant granite columns supporting the Virabhadra temple, one pillar appears partially suspended above the ground, allowing visitors to slide cloth or paper beneath it. At first, this seems like a simple optical illusion caused by uneven flooring, but structural analysis suggests something much more complicated. Despite not transferring weight conventionally into the foundation below, the pillar still appears to participate in supporting the enormous stone ceiling above it. In modern engineering, buildings rely on direct vertical load transfer, where gravity moves through columns into the ground. Yet Lapakshi seems to redistribute force sideways through interconnected stone beams and compression balancing. This becomes even more difficult to explain considering the material involved. Granite possesses immense compressive strength, ranging between roughly 130 and 250 megapascals, but it is also highly brittle under tension. A small error during construction should have created cracks or structural collapse centuries ago. Instead, the temple has survived almost 500 years of monsoon humidity, thermal expansion, erosion, and seismic vibration. British engineers reportedly attempted to move the pillar during the colonial era to understand its mechanism, but local accounts claim the ceiling shifted slightly almost immediately afterward. Whether exaggerated or not, the incident reinforced the belief that the hanging pillar was not decorative, but part of a precisely balanced mechanical system. Even modern computer simulations still struggle to fully explain how the load distribution inside Lapakshi functions without conventional anchoring methods. Another major mystery involves the transportation and placement of the enormous granite stones used throughout the temple complex. Some beams inside Lapakshi stretch beyond 7 meters in length and weigh several tons, yet the surrounding region lacks nearby quarry sources capable of explaining every stone used in construction. This raises one of the oldest unanswered questions in ancient engineering. How were these stones moved with such precision? The builders of the Vijayanagara Empire had no hydraulic cranes, steel pulleys, diesel machinery, or modern lifting systems, yet they positioned gigantic stone masses accurately enough to preserve structural balance for centuries. Researchers believe ancient engineers may have relied on combinations of earthen ramps, wooden rollers, counterweight systems, and coordinated labor forces. Similar theories are proposed for the Egyptian pyramids and the colossal megaliths of Baalbek in Lebanon. However, no experimental archaeology project has successfully reproduced the exact scale and precision of Lapakshi using only period-accurate technology. Some granite joints within the temple are fitted so tightly that even blade-width gaps are difficult to detect. Precision at that level becomes exponentially harder when dealing with stones weighing multiple tons because microscopic alignment errors increase dramatically under immense pressure. The mystery is therefore not simply how the stones were transported, but how they were positioned with enough accuracy to maintain long-term mechanical equilibrium without steel reinforcement or modern surveying equipment. Lepakshi also presents a major puzzle in terms of structural survival. Southern India experiences occasional seismic activity, seasonal flooding, heat expansion, and gradual geological shifting, yet much of the temple remains remarkably intact after centuries of environmental stress. Modern earthquake-resistant architecture often relies on flexible foundations, steel reinforcement systems, and shock-absorbing technologies to dissipate kinetic energy. Lepakshi possesses none of these recognizable modern systems, yet its structure continues to resist collapse. Some researchers believe the temple may use primitive forms of vibration redistribution through interconnected stone geometry. Instead of resisting force directly, the structure may redirect stress across multiple pillars and beams, reducing concentrated failure points throughout the building. This concept resembles the earthquake-resistant stonework seen in Incan architecture at Machu Picchu and Cusco, where precisely cut stones absorb movement without catastrophic collapse. In both cases, ancient civilizations appear to have understood stress behavior at a surprisingly advanced level that is difficult to explain purely through trial and error. Some engineers even suspect the hanging pillar itself may help redistribute force through micro-adjustments within the structure. If that interpretation is correct, Lepakshi would represent not merely a religious monument, but a sophisticated experiment in mechanical force management centuries ahead of its time. Among all the mysteries surrounding Lepakshi, the most scientifically puzzling may be the survival of its ceiling paintings. The temple contains some of the finest mural artwork from the Vijayanagara period, and many pigments remain visible and vibrant despite nearly 500 years of exposure to oxidation, humidity, smoke, dust, biological decay, and extreme heat. Under ordinary environmental conditions, ancient pigments gradually deteriorate as ultraviolet radiation breaks molecular bonds. Moisture encourages fungal growth, and thermal expansion causes cracking and separation from the surface beneath. Yet large sections of the Lepakshi murals still preserve deep reds, earthy yellows, blacks, whites, and muted blues with extraordinary clarity. Scientific analysis suggests many of the pigments were created using naturally occurring minerals ground into ultrafine powders. Red colors may have contained iron oxide compounds similar to hematite, while yellow tones likely came from ochre rich in hydrated iron minerals. Carbon black pigments may have been produced from soot residues created during controlled combustion. However, the greatest mystery lies not in the pigments themselves, but in the binding medium used to preserve them. Researchers believe Vijayanagara artisans mixed the mineral powders with organic substances capable of penetrating microscopic pores within the stone surface. Instead of resting on top of the ceiling like ordinary paint, parts of the pigment appear chemically integrated into the material itself. This creates a preservation mechanism surprisingly similar to modern mineral staining techniques used in industrial construction. Some conservation scientists compare Lepakshi's murals to the Roman frescoes of Pompeii, where pigments fused into wet plaster through chemical carbonation. Yet the comparison makes the mystery even stranger because Lepakshi exists in a far harsher tropical climate than the relatively dry Mediterranean environment surrounding Pompeii. The survival rate becomes even more astonishing when compared with many medieval European church paintings that faded far more severely despite surviving for shorter periods. Another unexplained detail involves the smooth preparation layers beneath certain mural sections, suggesting advanced polishing or mineral treatment techniques before painting even began. The exact organic formula used by Vijayanagara craftsmen has never been completely reconstructed, meaning part of the technology responsible for preserving these colors across half a millennium may have been permanently lost. Near the temple lies another strange anomaly, a giant footprint-shaped depression carved into stone measuring more than 1 meter in length. Local legends claim the footprint belongs to Hanuman, the monkey deity associated with the Ramayana epic, while others believe it marks the step of a divine giant. But the real mystery is the water contained inside it. Even during intense heat and dry weather, the footprint often remains filled with moisture or standing water. Some researchers argue that underground capillary seepage slowly feeds the depression from below, while others believe the footprint may have been intentionally engineered to collect rainwater or condensation. No explanation has been universally accepted. Whether natural or artificially modified, the feature contributes to Lepakshi's growing reputation as a place where mythology and unexplained engineering continuously overlap. High above the rugged hills of northeastern North Macedonia stands Kokino, a Bronze Age site that should not exist in the form archaeologists found it. Carved directly into volcanic rock nearly 1,000 meters above sea level, Kokino appears at first glance to be nothing more than a windswept hill of fractured stone. But when the sun rises during the summer and winter solstices, narrow stone markers align with extraordinary precision, revealing a pattern many researchers believe was intentionally engineered more than 3,800 years ago. What makes Kokino truly mysterious is not simply its age, but the possibility that an isolated Bronze Age society possessed astronomical knowledge far beyond what historians once thought possible. The site first gained major international attention in the early 2000s, when archaeologists studying the volcanic outcrop noticed unusual stone cuts and observation points embedded into the terrain. Further analysis suggested that several of these markers aligned with the sunrise during key solar events, including the equinoxes and solstices. Some researchers compared the site to Stonehenge, while others argued that Kokino might represent an entirely different form of ancient observatory, one integrated directly into a natural volcanic formation rather than constructed from transported megaliths. The first major mystery surrounding Kokino is its improbable location. Most Bronze Age settlements were built near rivers, fertile valleys, or trade routes. Kokino was built on a harsh volcanic ridge exposed to powerful winds and dramatic seasonal temperature changes. The terrain is uneven, difficult to access, and unsuitable for large-scale agriculture. Yet ancient people repeatedly climbed this mountain and modified its surface with deliberate precision. Archaeologists have identified carved seats, narrow observation corridors, and stone notches cut into basalt formations. The question remains deeply unsettling. Why would a Bronze Age society invest enormous effort into transforming an inhospitable mountaintop into what appears to be a celestial observation center? One possible answer lies in survival itself. Ancient civilizations depended on accurate seasonal prediction. A mistake in planting cycles could mean famine. At Kokino, the sunrise aligns with specific stone markers during the summer solstice, winter solstice, and equinox periods. This would have allowed observers to track the changing seasons with surprising accuracy. Modern measurements suggest some alignments deviate by only a few degrees. That level of precision becomes even more mysterious, considering the technological limitations of the period. The people of Kokino had no telescopes, no optical lenses, and no advanced mathematical notation. Their measurements would have depended entirely on naked eye observation repeated across generations. The second major mystery is even more controversial. Several researchers believe Kokino may contain evidence of lunar tracking, not just solar observation. Certain stone markers appear to correspond with the 19-year metonic cycle of the moon, a complex astronomical pattern formerly documented centuries later in ancient Greece. The Metonic cycle occurs because 19 solar years closely match 235 lunar months, allowing ancient astronomers to synchronize lunar and solar calendars. If Kokino's builders truly understood this cycle, it would imply a level of astronomical continuity requiring decades of careful observation. Critics argue that these alignments may simply be coincidence. Volcanic rock naturally fractures into irregular shapes, and humans are often inclined to see patterns where none exist. However, supporters of the astronomical interpretation counter that the number of meaningful alignments at Kokino exceeds what random geology would reasonably produce. Some observation points only function correctly when viewed from very specific carved positions, strongly suggesting intentional design rather than accidental formation. Another unresolved puzzle involves engineering. Unlike Stonehenge, Kokino did not require transporting massive stones across great distances. Instead, its creators modified existing volcanic basalt. But basalt is an extremely hard material. Even modern cutting tools struggle against dense volcanic rock. Bronze Age tools would have been primitive by comparison, consisting mainly of early metal implements and stone hammers. Yet several cuts at Kokino appear surprisingly clean and purposeful. Some researchers propose that ancient workers may have used repeated heating and cooling techniques to fracture the rock in controlled ways. Others believe the marks are partly natural but selectively enhanced by humans. No consensus exists. The site also raises questions about social structure. Archaeologists have found relatively limited evidence of a large permanent settlement surrounding Kokino. This suggests the site may not have functioned as a normal city. Instead, it could have been a ceremonial center visited only during the important astronomical events. If that theory is correct, then the individuals capable of interpreting the sky may have held extraordinary authority. In many ancient cultures, astronomy and religion were inseparable. Predicting eclipses, solstices, or seasonal transitions could easily appear supernatural to ordinary people. At Kokino, knowledge itself may have become a form of power. Some researchers believe the carved stone thrones found at the site strengthen this idea. These elevated seats overlook the horizon and align with certain celestial positions. One theory suggests elite observers or ritual leaders sat there during ceremonies connected to the sun. Similar symbolic observation platforms have appeared in several ancient cultures where rulers linked themselves to cosmic cycles in order to legitimize authority. The Maya, Egyptians, and Mesopotamian priesthoods all connected celestial events with divine order. Kokino may represent a smaller but equally sophisticated version of the same phenomenon. The comparisons become even stranger when Kokino is examined alongside distant ancient observatories. Chanquillo in Peru, built more than 2,000 years ago, contains 13 towers aligned with solar movement across the horizon. Nabta Playa in the Sahara Desert includes stone circles linked to seasonal astronomy dating back thousands of years before the pyramids. None of these civilizations had known direct contact, yet each developed sophisticated methods of tracking celestial motion. This recurring pattern has forced archaeologists to reconsider a long-standing assumption that ancient societies only developed advanced astronomical systems after urban civilization became fully established. Perhaps the most haunting mystery of Kokino is how much knowledge may have disappeared forever. No written records explaining the site have ever been discovered. No astronomical charts survive. No inscriptions explain who built the observatory, how observations were conducted, or why certain celestial events mattered so deeply to its creators. Everything modern researchers know comes from stone alignments, excavation layers, and mathematical reconstruction. Humanity is effectively attempting to decode the shattered remains of a scientific system abandoned nearly 4 millennia ago. What do you think Kokino really was? A sacred ritual site? Or an ancient observatory far ahead of its time? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Northeastern Azerbaijan holds the ruins of Chirag Gala, a fortress standing more than 1,200 meters above sea level, surrounded by cliffs, violent winds, and steep volcanic stone ridges. From a distance, it looks impossible. A massive military complex built on terrain where even modern construction equipment would struggle to operate. Yet for nearly 15 centuries, its walls resisted earthquakes, erosion, invasions, and extreme weather. Even stranger historians believe this isolated fortress may once have been part of an ancient long-distance communication network capable of transmitting warning signals across the Caucasus Mountains long before modern telecommunications existed. Today, many archaeologists consider Chirag Gala one of the least understood military engineering sites of the early medieval world. Although local communities had known about the ruins for centuries, systematic archaeological surveys only intensified during the 20th century under Soviet-era Caucasus expeditions. Researchers quickly realized the fortress was far larger and more sophisticated than previously assumed. Built during the period of the Sassanid Empire, likely between the 5th and 6th centuries AD, Chirag Gala occupied a strategic position overlooking routes connecting the Caspian coast to the northern Caucasus frontier. Excavations uncovered defensive walls, towers, reservoirs, stone foundations, and evidence of prolonged military occupation. But the deeper archaeologists investigated, the more puzzling the site became. The fortress was not simply placed on the mountain, it was engineered into the mountain itself. The most controversial theory surrounding Chirag Gala involves its possible use as part of an ancient optical communication network. The name Chirag Gala is often translated as Fortress of Light or Lamp Fortress. Historians believe this may not be symbolic. Instead, it could describe the actual function of the structure. From the highest towers, observers can see enormous stretches of surrounding terrain, including distant mountain corridors and lowland approaches near the Caspian basin. Modern topographic analysis suggests visibility lines from Chirag Gala overlap with several other ancient fortified positions scattered across the Caucasus. This has led some researchers to propose that the Sassanids created a chain of mountaintop signal stations capable of relaying warnings across hundreds of kilometers. The concept itself sounds surprisingly advanced for the 6th century. Yet historically, long-distance visual signaling systems did exist in ancient civilizations. The Byzantine Empire later used beacon chains across Anatolia. Ancient China developed smoke signal towers along frontier defenses. Even the Greeks experimented with coded torch systems described by Polybius more than 2,000 years ago. But Chirag Gala presents unusual technical challenges. The Caucasus Mountains are notorious for heavy fog, sudden storms, and unstable visibility conditions. Maintaining reliable communication under such conditions would require extremely precise positioning of observation towers. Researchers using satellite mapping discovered that several fortress locations appear intentionally placed within direct visual range of one another despite the difficult terrain. This suggests the builders understood line-of-sight geometry at a sophisticated level. Some historians speculate that signal fires may have been amplified using polished metal reflectors or shielded beacon chambers designed to increase visibility at long distances. Others believe coded smoke pulses or sequential torch patterns may have been used to transmit specific military warnings. No surviving written manual explaining the system has ever been found. What makes the mystery even more fascinating is the speed such a network could theoretically achieve. A mounted messenger traveling through mountain terrain might require days to deliver military information. But a relay system using sequential fire signals could potentially transmit warnings across frontier regions within hours or even minutes under ideal conditions. For an empire constantly threatened by northern invasions, such speed would have been revolutionary. If the theory is correct, Chirag Gala may represent one of the most advanced early warning systems of the ancient Caucasus world. The fortress itself raises enormous engineering questions. Transporting construction materials to such altitude would have been extraordinarily difficult. Many surviving stone blocks weigh several hundred kilograms. Some wall sections sit directly beside vertical cliff faces, where there is barely enough space for modern hikers to stand safely, yet the masonry remains remarkably stable. Unlike conventional fortifications built on flat ground, the walls of Chiragala follow the mountain's natural geometry. Instead of forcing straight defensive lines, the builders adapted every section to the rock beneath it. Angles shift constantly. Foundations curve around cliffs. Defensive corridors merge into natural stone barriers. This adaptive construction technique resembles certain high-altitude fortresses found in Iran and parts of the Byzantine frontier, but Chiragala's terrain is arguably even more extreme. Engineers studying earthquake-resistant ancient architecture have noted another unusual feature. Many sections lean slightly inward rather than standing perfectly vertical. Modern structural simulations show this inward angle may help distribute seismic stress more effectively during earthquakes. Considering the Caucasus region experiences frequent tectonic activity, this may not have been accidental. The builders appear to have understood principles of load distribution and geological stability centuries before formal structural engineering existed. One of the greatest mysteries surrounding Chiragala is survival. How could a fortress on such a barren mountain sustain soldiers for long periods? Archaeologists discovered reservoirs and water storage systems carved directly into the rock, but rainfall alone may not have been sufficient for a permanent garrison. This has triggered theories that the fortress used advanced water harvesting techniques or hidden spring collection systems inside the mountain itself. Some cistern interiors contain traces of unusual waterproof coatings. Similar ancient hydraulic coatings have been identified in Sassanid and Roman engineering projects, often involving combinations of lime, ash, mineral dust, and organic additives. What makes Chiragala remarkable is the durability of these systems under harsh mountain conditions. Even after more than 1,000 years of freeze-thaw cycles, parts of the water infrastructure remain identifiable. Some researchers compare the mystery to the durability of Roman concrete, which continues to puzzle materials scientists today because of its unexpected resistance to chemical erosion. If Chiragala possessed an efficient mountain water management system, it would explain how the fortress could operate during prolonged sieges despite its isolated location. The location of Chiragala may also have served psychological purposes. Any invading force approaching from below would see massive stone walls emerging directly from the mountain ridges. From certain angles, the fortress appears almost fused with the landscape itself. Military historians believe this visual dominance may have been intentional. Ancient defensive architecture often relied not only on physical barriers but also intimidation. At Chiragala, attackers face steep ascents under constant exposure from elevated defenders. Even small defending forces could potentially control narrow access routes with devastating efficiency. Some surviving tower positions suggest overlapping observation zones capable of monitoring multiple valleys simultaneously. This resembles later medieval kill zone strategies, yet Chiragala predates many of those systems by centuries. Its builders may have created one of the earliest examples of terrain-integrated mountain warfare architecture in the Caucasus region. Modern drone surveys indicate the visible ruins may represent only a fraction of the original system. Satellite imaging has revealed traces of collapsed walls, terraces, and possible lower defensive positions extending down the mountainside. Erosion and landslides may have buried major sections of the complex beneath rock and sediment. Some archaeologists suspect Chiragala was not an isolated fortress at all, but part of a vast defensive chain protecting the northern frontier of the Sassanid Empire against nomadic incursions from the Eurasian steppes. This theory aligns with other regional fortifications, including massive defensive systems near Derbent, sometimes called the Caspian Gates. Together, these structures may have formed one of the largest coordinated frontier defense systems of the ancient world. Yet large portions remain unexplored because of dangerous terrain and limited excavation access. What do you think Chiragala truly was? Just a mountain fortress? or part of a forgotten ancient communication network far ahead of its time? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In the valley of Oaxaca, Mexico, stands Mitla Archaeological Site, one of the strangest architectural sites ever built in the ancient Americas. Unlike the giant pyramids of the Maya or the massive stone fortresses of the Inca, Mitla's greatest mystery is hidden in its walls. Thousands upon thousands of perfectly cut stone pieces form geometric mosaics so precise that even modern engineers struggle to explain how they were created without iron tools, industrial saws, or mechanical equipment. The most mysterious part of the complex is the Hall of the Columns, a ceremonial structure built with enormous monolithic pillars and walls covered in intricate stone patterns. Some archaeologists estimate that certain mosaic panels contain more than 100,000 individually shaped stones, each fitted together without mortar. In a region constantly shaken by earthquakes, many of these walls still stand after nearly 15 centuries. The question is unsettling. How did an ancient civilization with supposedly limited technology achieve a level of precision that resembles modern engineering? Spanish chroniclers first documented Mitla during the 16th century after the conquest of the Zapotec and Mixtec regions. Indigenous people referred to the site as a sacred place connected to death and the underworld. The name Mitla itself comes from the Nahuatl word Mictlan, meaning place of the dead. Systematic archaeological excavations began during the 19th century and intensified throughout the 20th century under Mexican archaeologists such as Alfonso Quezzo. Excavations revealed ceremonial courtyards, underground tombs, massive stone columns, and some of the most sophisticated geometric stone mosaics ever discovered in Mesoamerica. Modern laser surveys and structural studies later showed that the precision of Mitla's construction was far greater than early researchers initially believed. The walls of Mitla are unlike almost anything else in the ancient world. Instead of carving patterns directly into large stone surfaces, the builders created enormous geometric mosaics using thousands of separately cut stones assembled like an architectural puzzle. This distinction is critical. At sites such as Chichen Itza or many Maya cities, decorative reliefs were carved into finished surfaces. Mitla's builders instead manufactured countless individual pieces with astonishingly consistent dimensions and angles. Some researchers believe a single mosaic panel may contain tens of thousands of stones, each shaped to fit precisely into a larger mathematical pattern. The precision becomes even more extraordinary when examined closely. In many areas, gaps between stones are so small that inserting even a thin metal blade becomes difficult. Several stones display 90-degree cuts and repeating angular symmetry that appear almost machine-made. The mystery deepens because the Zapotec civilization supposedly relied primarily on stone hammers, sand abrasion, obsidian cutting tools, and relatively soft copper implements. None of these tools should easily produce such uniform precision on hard volcanic stone. Modern engineers studying the mosaics have compared the complexity of Mitla's patterns to advanced modular engineering systems. The repeated step fret motifs are not random decoration. Their alignment remains remarkably consistent across long sections of wall, suggesting detailed planning and mathematical organization before construction even began. Some researchers have proposed that the mosaics may also have served a structural purpose. Oaxaca lies in one of the most seismically active regions of Mexico. Earthquakes regularly damage modern buildings there even today. Yet Mitla's geometric walls survived centuries of seismic activity. Unlike Roman architecture, which relied heavily on mortar and concrete, Mitla's walls used dry-fit stone construction. The stones lock together mechanically. Several structural engineers have suggested that the repeating geometric patterns may distribute stress and vibration across the wall surface during earthquakes, functioning almost like an ancient seismic absorption system. This idea has led to comparisons with Machu Picchu and the earthquake-resistant masonry of the Inca. However, Mittler differs in one important way. The Inca used enormous polygonal blocks, while Mittler achieved stability using extremely small and mathematically repetitive components. The engineering philosophy appears completely different. Even more mysterious is the sheer labor required. If a single wall truly contains over 100,000 stones, every piece had to be quarried, shaped, transported, positioned, and fitted manually. Some estimates suggest that constructing only one ceremonial courtyard could have required millions of hours of labor, and yet the patterns remain nearly flawless. At the center of the complex stands the famous Hall of the Columns. Inside are 6 enormous monolithic stone columns carved from volcanic trachyte. Some weigh several tons each. The transportation problem alone remains unresolved. The nearest viable stone sources are believed to have been kilometers away through mountainous terrain. The Zapotec had no horses, oxen, or wheeled transport systems capable of moving such massive loads. Researchers believe human labor alone transported the columns using ropes, wooden rollers, and earthen ramps, but no definitive reconstruction has successfully demonstrated the process. The columns themselves are also unusually refined. Their surfaces display a level of symmetry and smoothness unexpected from purely hand-shaped stonework. In some sections, curvature deviations are surprisingly minimal, suggesting careful geometric control during carving. Several archaeologists have noted similarities between Mittler's columns and monolithic traditions seen at Puma Punku, where stone shaping precision also exceeds expectations for the technological period. Spanish priests recorded stories claiming that Mittler contained sacred underground chambers where Zapotec rulers and priests communicated with the gods and spirits of the dead. Beneath parts of the Hall of the Columns, archaeologists discovered tombs and narrow subterranean corridors built from carefully fitted stone blocks. Some passages remain sealed even today. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have hinted at the possibility of additional underground spaces still hidden beneath the complex. Because many areas remain inaccessible, speculation continues about the true extent of Mittler's subterranean network. Some researchers believe the underground architecture had ritual significance connected to death and rebirth. Others suggest acoustic properties may have played a role. Narrow stone corridors can amplify echoes and low-frequency sounds in unusual ways, potentially creating psychological effects during ceremonies. Like many advanced ancient civilizations, the builders of Mittler appear to have incorporated astronomy into architecture. Several doorways and alignments correspond closely with solar positions during solstices and equinoxes. Researchers studying orientation angles found that portions of the complex may have functioned as ceremonial observation points tied to agricultural calendars. The Zapotec were already known for sophisticated calendar systems, but Mittler suggests a deeper integration between mathematics, ritual, and engineering. Some scholars even argue that the repeating geometric mosaics may encode symbolic cosmological concepts rather than serving purely decorative purposes. Do you think the builders of Mittler archaeological site possessed engineering knowledge far beyond what historians currently believe? Or are we still missing a crucial piece of the ancient world's lost technology? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.